Hey guys, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto's touch could melt any girl's heart and clothes? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator Font She beautiful creation. The first time he laid eyes on her, it was a Tuesday in the middle of a cafe. He had been sitting in a corner booth, waiting for one of his friends. She walked with an air of cautious elegance. He hadn't known that was possible before watching her retreating form. The way her hips swayed with each click of her heels had his mind reeling. Desperately trying to find fault, any fault he could. No one should be allowed to look that perfect, he argued, so it seemed only logical he be the one to find a blemish. She wore a skirt, neither long nor short. He wasn't a designer like Ino. He had no clue what the length was called. All he could wrap his head around was the way black leather contrasted nicely against her skin, the way it hugged her curves. Reluctantly, he forced his eyes to keep scanning upwards. She also wore a long-sleeve shirt tucked in. It was an interesting shade of purple. Mauve maybe? He didn't know. He never paid attention when Ino tried explaining these types of things to him. It looks nice, he thought. Very pretty. Next he noticed long flowing pinned straight hair. Dark tresses spilled down her back like unfathomably exotic cascades. Each strand moved fluidly with the bounce of her steps and settled easily back into place when she halted. It gave him more time to look, to observe. They looked silky. Vaguely he wondered how delicious they would feel beneath his fingertips. Yeah, he decided, she was very pretty. He hadn't noticed just how hard he was staring until she turned around, no doubt feeling his burning gaze on her back. His immediate reaction was to look away, to look anywhere but her face, no matter how much he wanted to. Naruto could feel the heavy beating of his erratic heart. He held his breath. Eventually curiosity won out and he spared a glance. She wasn't looking at him. Instead, she was smiling at her companion. The breath he had been holding left him instantaneously. She had unknowingly delivered a swift kick to his lungs, rebooting his entire system. Had they come in together? He honestly hadn't noticed anyone else with her. Not that you were looking, he reminded himself. She had a nice smile though, the type you definitely wouldn't mind waking up to in the mornings. It was small, demure. There was an air of politeness that hung around her, clung to her. He had never met anyone who simply exuded grace by sheer presence. She also had nice skin, soft, he assumed, at least it looked that way, almost porcelain. Her eyes though, he racked his brain for a better word to describe her eyes. Nice just wouldn't do them justice. Pretty seemed to pale in comparison too. I should read more, or at least listen to Ino when she describes pretty things, pretty people. He couldn't think of a single adjective that would fully encompass the type of attention they elicited within him, almost claiming it entirely. They were big, took up quite a bit of her face. They were light, almost milky white, but he could tell they just weren't. They were a color he had never seen before, a shade he wasn't familiar with. And yet he felt something familiar about them. Something in the back of his mind trying to tell him he knew exactly what shade they were. His thoughts dismissed themselves as soon as she glanced his way, two sets of eyes meeting awkwardly. Instinctively he smiled at her. Slowly but surely a small smile grazed her features and it seemed as if his entire being lit up. No, pretty certainly did not do her justice. The second time he saw her was less of a coincidence. As shameful as it was, he had hung around that cafe way too often for it to be considered luck to see her again. This time she wore more casual clothing, dark wash jeans and a light gray hoodie that seemed to eat her alive. It dawned on him with relative speed that it probably did not belong to her. The thought brought a scowl to his face, his eyes engulfed with flames. Whose sweater was she wearing? He watched with unreasonable and unfounded anger as a tall dark-haired man who appeared to be around her age placed a calming yet firm hand on her unsuspecting shoulder. He guided her out with such caution that it left Naruto dazed. Of course a girl like that already has a boyfriend. That didn't seem to stop him though, from visiting the cafe more than what was socially acceptable in order to see her again. To maybe get a chance to talk to her, to have her impenetrable gaze solely fixed on him. Heat rose quickly from his feet to the tips of his ears with that thought. He reasoned he really couldn't help it at this point. For the better part of 3 weeks since he had first laid eyes on her, she was all he could think about. He definitely was the definition of a creep at this point. I don't even know her name. The third time he ran into her was entirely a coincidence. He had been at Ino's parents' flower shop, stopping by to get some lilies. He staggered back in utter surprise to find someone grabbing a lily same as him. The sheer effort it took to control his facial features and breathing when they had accidentally brushed hands was immense. He was, however, happy that he hadn't been the only one to blush. But it did look a lot more endearing on her. Sorry. He heard her sputter out, clearly embarrassed. God, even her voice is pretty. And no, it's my fault. Sometimes I'm really bullheaded, ya know, like a one-track mind without the ability to really take in my surroundings. My friends think it's hilarious, but I always seem to put myself in really embarrassing situations because of it. Great, he was fucking rambling. Girlish giggles peeled elegantly past her lips and his heart skipped a beat, maybe two, he honestly couldn't tell. No one ever thought his rambling to be funny. Go ahead, he said, allowing her the space to grab the flowers she wanted. She looked at him for a few seconds, unmoving. He had been right in his previous assessment about the shade of her eyes. They weren't white, more like a very pale lavender. So goddamn pretty. The sight caused unwarranted goosebumps to bloom on his nape. He would graciously get lost in her curious gaze for hours without end. He hadn't realized he was holding his breath until she smiled at him. It was small but so powerful. So warm. He could feel it engulfing him, almost as if the only thing keeping him standing was the warmth she unintentionally provided him. He hadn't known such a warmth existed. Thank you. She bowed slightly and picked up a couple of lilies. They were my mother's favorite. She spoke up and he was completely enthralled by the lull of her voice, even if her tone had seemed a little sad. My mom's too, he heard himself say. They had been. At least that's what his dad told him. He really couldn't remember much about his mother. He vaguely noticed that his tone was just as downtrodden as hers was. Do you know a lot about flowers? She inquired, and he'd honestly been more ecstatic that she was trying to converse with him than having the brain capacity to process her question. Not really, he admitted, almost bashfully. Long, bulky fingers itched to reach out and caress porcelain cheeks, if only to prove to himself that she was real. He held back. I just know those were her favorite, so I get them. She nodded at his answer and her smile widened. Tanned cheeks seemed to burst at the thought of being the reason behind her smile, his own following close after. Lilies symbolize motherhood a lot of the time. Different colors can mean different things. The pink stand for love, the yellow for joy, the orange for warmth, and the purple for pride. He really hadn't known, he had just been grabbing white lilies and that's that. Wow, that was all his shallow breath allowed him to say. How is it that she, a complete stranger, could leave him so asthmatic? He had been staring at her the entire time, not missing any of the subtle changes her eyes and face had made during her explanation. Naruto couldn't get over how fascinating this girl was, how mesmerized he seemed to become in her presence. Almost as if there was nothing beyond her. He watched her turn back and pick up two of each color. An array of different colored lilies in each of her hands. Naruto waited with bated breath. He watched completely enthralled as midnight hair was replaced with glossy eyes, so deep and so warm. She was looking right at him, and yet he couldn't stop himself from gawking. He towered over her small frame. She is so fucking cute. The girl offered him the bunch of lilies protectively held in her right hand. It felt more like a gift to him. I'm sure much like my mother, yours was everything I just described, so here. Again he felt like the wind had been knocked out of his lungs, but took the flowers without hesitation. Before he had a chance to thank her, she had turned to walk towards the register where Ino stood, hands on her hip. Eyebrows so high it seemed like they would get caught in her hair. He tried his best to ignore the blonde's curious gaze as he stalked closer to the smaller of the two females, still taken aback from their conversation. Heart beating painfully loud, he was sure both of them could hear it. By the time he wiped his clammy hand against his jeans, she was already heading towards the door, lilies in hand. Wait, he had no idea what possessed him to yell at her, knowing full well they were the only people in the shop. Nervously he rubbed the back of his neck with his free hand. What's your name? He could see her hesitate for half of a moment. Hinata, she supplied, the same small smile on her face. I'm Naruto, he exclaimed excitedly. Maybe I'll see you around? It definitely came out as a question. He watched her nod, exit the shop and get into a matte black vehicle. The windows had all been tinted, so he really had no idea who had been driving. He didn't care. He was beaming. This interaction was sure to keep his dreams vivid. The voice behind him startled him back to reality. He had totally forgotten who had been witness to the scene that had just occurred, to his painfully obvious crush. I can't wait to tell Sakura. Ino beamed, pale blue eyes shining with something akin to mirth. He couldn't even find it in him to refute or argue. Fuck it, he would tell all his friends if this ended up going in the direction he wanted it to. Chuckling more to himself, Naruto went to dig through his pocket for his wallet. Although he and Ino had been friends since childhood, he still felt bad whenever she offered him free flowers for his mom's grave. It just didn't feel right if they didn't come from him. She already paid. Ino's voice registered in his mind. She sounded completely amused. Paid for what? The lilies, she answered. This time there was a hint of annoyance. He had apparently asked a dumb question. Your lilies. She kept speaking, making his already shaky hand tremble with what? Admiration. You know you shouldn't. Naruto looked up to the owner of the voice. Shikamaru, a brown-eyed tall man, stood in front of him. He already knew what his comment was referring to. Ino told you already, huh? His question was rhetorical, yet Shikamaru nodded. Squinty chocolate eyes looked at him deliberately. Something about his glare unnerved Naruto. Suddenly he found himself missing lavender-tinted eyes. Here we go. I haven't even done anything. Naruto sounded exasperated, already getting in shit before he had even been able to make a move. Maybe you should reconsider before making a move. Shikamaru always had a way of making it seem like he could read his mind. He bet all his money it was because of that engineering brain of his. You know the type of life we live. He did know, he knew better than almost anyone the type of life they lived. The sacrifices that came with it, the hurt. I know. He answered tersely, not at all interested in having this conversation. He heard his friend sigh and pull out a cigarette. All I'm saying is be careful. You really don't want to get her involved if she's as sweet and innocent as Ino had described. He knew that too, that a girl like that wouldn't be able to last in their line of work. That's what made her all the more interesting. She had absolutely nothing to do with all of this shit. I just want to get to know her, he admitted. A longing in his voice he hadn't heard from himself in a very long time. He could tell Shikamaru had heard it too from the way his calculative eyes dilated. Do you want her to know you? The question hung in the air, basking in the discomfort it had provided. No, he most definitely did not want her to know him, all of him. As if getting his point across, the brown-haired boy put out the cigarette and walked away. Hinata, this is the third time this week you've asked me to stop for coffee. The voice sounded annoyed yet amused. Leave it to Sasuke to mix two very contrasting emotions into a single tone. It's literally on the way back to the compound. She defended, accentuating part of her response. You drag me out every day to train. The least you could do is treat me to coffee. She eyed him carefully, almost as an afterthought she said, and cinnamon buns. I feel like actually staying in the cafe for a bit today. She heard her companion groan and knew she had won. Sasuke was never much of a talker. She knew he hated public settings, mostly due to his good looks, as conceited and stupid as that sounded. Everywhere they went, Sasuke had girls callously fling themselves at him. Not even when he wrapped a protective arm around her did they stop. Which in all honesty was quite insulting. If they had actually been dating, other women should at least respect that. Knowing this, she simply accommodated him. They always grabbed coffees to go, always trained in an isolated facility, and always at the crack of dawn. Today she wanted to sit in a cafe and eat her cinnamon bun. Is it the blonde again? Hinata felt heat dust her cheeks. No. Yeah, right. The voice sounded totally annoyed, no hint of amusement this time. Sasuke, school starts up in a couple of weeks. It's our last year, and you know as well as I do that once we're in, we're just in. Silly things like grabbing coffee and enjoying it at the cafe won't be a possibility. She noted the sadness that tinged her voice. She had been thinking a lot about this lately. What the end of their university careers would actually mean. Dark eyes looked at her intensely. She knew he knew she was right, even if he didn't want to admit it. Without another word, Sasuke parked his car and unbuckled his seatbelt. Hinata wordlessly followed his actions and walked past the cafe door he had just opened. Subconsciously she found herself looking out at the sea of people. She remembered vaguely seeing him here once or twice. Who knew? She wasn't counting. Yeah, right. She sighed internally, annoyed with her own admittance. After the short conversation she shared with him whilst buying flowers, she couldn't quite keep her curiosity at bay. He was a breath of fresh air, so unlike anyone she had come in contact with. His gaze, his features, they were all so openly honest. His eyes though, they were an impossible shade of cerulean that put the sea to shame. So unlike the ones on Sasuke, or Neji or even herself. Back corner. Sasuke whispered. Instinctively she followed his eyesight and watched enthralled as warm blue eyes stared at her. Dare she think excitedly? Her reaction had been proof enough for her companion to know the blonde was the sole reason he was being dragged into this mess of a place. What can I get ya? They both heard a familiar bubbly voice ask. Hinata turned to smile at the younger girl while Sasuke rolled his eyes. She knew he hated fake politeness. He didn't seem to notice the girl recoil from his look and Hinata frowned uncomfortably at the scene unfolding. I'll have a medium chai tea with a shot of espresso, 1 cream and 1 sugar please. Hinata took a quick breath, willing her heart not to persuade her mind to look back at the blonde man in the corner as she continued their order. He'll have a large black coffee and lastly we'll take 2 cinnamon buns please. The girl in front of them expertly typed in a bunch of keys while asking if that would be all, to which both of them nodded. $15.75, she spoke up. Hinata noticed a bit intimidated. Probably by Sasuke, she mused. He was the very definition of intimidating. Abysmally dark eyes that seemed to devour everything in their path paired with a menacing glare that could rival any horror movie villain. She found herself smiling, if only people actually knew him. Hinata went to grab her wallet in her jacket pocket, but before she even had the chance to look up she heard the clerk quietly mutter a thank you as Sasuke tapped his card against the machine. Thanks Sasu. His scowl deepened. She knew he really hated that nickname. They stepped aside waiting for their order, which surprisingly took no time at all to make. She took hold of their drinks while her best friend grabbed the sweets. Hinata could almost see a hint of red in his eyes as they glittered in total amusement while he led them to a table right beside the booth in the back corner. The petite girl threw her companion a heated glare before cautiously sitting down in front of him. Past his spiked-up black hair she could see a pair of baby blue eyes and adorable whiskered cheeks. He wasn't alone this time though, and she kicked herself for even considering the idea that he would be available. Beside him sat a very pretty girl with short pink hair and sparkling green eyes. The type of girl that you would notice right away in a crowded area. The type of girl who probably earned a lot of attention. The type with a bubbly personality, she thought uncomfortably. Hinata was decidedly not that type of girl. She snapped out of her stupor as soon as dark eyes looked at her critically. A pale arm much the same shade as hers tilting her chin up. You're being dumb. He always had a way of knowing when she became self-deprecating, insecure. She smiled, big, not entirely happy but genuine nonetheless. She didn't know how she could ever go through life without Sasuke. Yeah, she waved off his concern and delicately bit into the cinnamon bun. Her small nose scrunched up and brows knit together in disgust. It was awful. She painfully swallowed the lump of undercooked dough. Maybe we shouldn't come here anymore. She winced at the knowing look from the man sat across from her. He had already bitten into his treat and spat it out into a napkin. Complete shock took over her system as soon as his deep chuckle filled the tense atmosphere. Sasuke almost never openly laughed. Her eyes widened in amazement as he continued to laugh, at her no doubt. She pouted. Quit it, Sasuke, she admonished, still pouting. People are staring. That only served to make him chuckle louder. It was a nice sound, she knew. She also knew that almost every single girl in that cafe was wishing for her to choke on her food. Especially now that they had caught a glimpse of the person he actually was. She amusedly watched the girl sitting beside Naruto look at Sasuke in a way she had seen many girls before her. At least she could one-up her just by being near Sasuke. As soon as the thought entered her mind she frowned. Jealousy really did not suit her personality. Plus, if she was staring at Sasuke like that, it meant that her feelings for Naruto did not run deep. That made her frown turn into a grimace. He deserved better than that. As if her companion finally noted her sour expression, he stopped chuckling. What's wrong? Nothing, I'm just really over this place. Her words had a finality to them she rarely used. Good, he retaliated. Quickly and effortlessly, he picked up the unwanted sweets and chucked them into a gray waste bin conveniently placed to his left. Ready? Yeah. Her voice didn't waver, even as she locked gazes with the man who had been constantly running through her thoughts. Whatever arrangement he had with the pink-haired girl was not any business of hers. Sasuke and Neji were right. She had no right hoping for something as stupid as love considering their lives. She didn't even bother smiling his way before turning around and grasping the hand Sasuke had extended, no doubt to keep his fangirls at bay. She didn't show up to the cafe after that day. He hadn't even seen her at the flower shop, and to be honest he had no other clue as to where he could find her. He groaned, frustrated with the fact that he was frustrated at not being able to see her. Who gives a shit? So what if she was pretty? So what if she was kind? So what if she was easy to talk to? So what if she almost always hung around a guy Sakura had bluntly described as dreamy? He didn't care. He shouldn't care. Except he knew himself better than that. She had piqued his interest so damn much that he rarely went a day without looking for her, without thinking about her. He was so screwed. Looking up from his bathroom sink and straight into the mirror, he couldn't help but notice the stark difference between him and Mr. Dreamy, as Sakura had dubbed him. His tanned skin, exuberant blue eyes and wild yellow hair were the opposite of his pale skin, dark eyes and charcoal hair. They looked good together, he mused with a grimace. They both kind of looked like royalty. Flawless skin. He thumbed over the marks on his face. Most days he could get away with telling curious people they were birthmarks. Reality was they were not. They served as an unwarranted reminder of what he had lost, of how fucked up his life actually was. They were scars, and that's all they would ever be. Listen here, Blondie, if we're late for the first day of our last year I will personally skewer you alive. I know of at least 3 different ways to do so. The threat hung in the air for a few short seconds before Naruto haphazardly stepped out of his room. He really hated upsetting Ino, not more so than Sakura, but she was a close second. Shino and Tenten already left. We were just waiting for you. Sakura called out, already 10 steps ahead. Right, thanks. Sorry. He muttered quietly and followed along. He climbed into the driver's seat and waited for his friends to pile in. Sakura and Ino sat in the back while Shikamaru took the passenger seat to his right. He looked at his friends once, noting silently what they were wearing, just in case anything were to happen. Shikamaru wore light wash faded jeans, a forest green hoodie and a black vest. No doubt to fight the chilling September air. Ino wore a short form-fitting black skirt, some sort of see-through tights underneath. She also wore a light grayed chunky sweater, only the front of it was tucked into her skirt. Her knee-high boots were a darker shade than the sweater, and she finished off with long blonde curled locks under a what most would probably consider stylish black corduroy hat. She always put a lot of thought into her outfits, he knew. She was graduating as a designer pretty soon, so it made sense, he supposed. Though he couldn't bring himself to care so much about things like that. Lastly, he glanced at the person he probably considered his best friend. Sakura's hair was too short to curl, so it hung inching close to her shoulder blades. She wore black ankle-high boots, gray and black plaid pants and a nameless band t-shirt tucked in. She threw a leather jacket on top to help keep heat in. She was definitely the most punk out of any of them. All good? He voiced aloud before turning on the car. They nodded back at him. It was a long-ass drive from the compound to their university. Not for the first time he wished they were allowed to live on campus. He knew better than to voice his desires out loud though, so wordlessly he drove while listening to Ino and Sakura gush about what their last year at Konoha University would entail. Naruto found himself wondering the benefits of their degrees a lot recently. He was pursuing a business degree, which made sense considering the legacy that would be left to him. But he loved to draw, to sketch. It didn't matter whether it was black and white or color, he loved designing things. He had designed pretty much all of his friends' tattoos. He let his mind wander to the pretty girl with moon-like eyes. She would look good with a tattoo he would design especially for her. Lavender lilies? Hey lover boy, stop acting so damn love-struck, you've spoken to her once. Naruto chuckled, it was the only thing he could do to keep his blush at bay. He hadn't known he had made it so obvious who he was thinking about. Walk ya to class? He asked shortly after, beckoning his flailing heart to settle. His pink-haired friend nodded warily. So, what's a pre-med student's schedule look like her last year at uni? Sakura was smart, not like Shikamaru smart because he was in a league all on his own, but smart. The type of smart that graduated high school 3 years early, Immediately got accepted into Konoha's prestigious medical program and managed to be able to graduate as a specialist in her own field in the same amount of time it took the rest of them to get their master's degrees. Which was saying a lot considering they had also graduated high school a year early. I stopped being pre-med years ago, she answered. He already knew, but he liked to bug her. But if you must know, it's just specialized classes really, thesis and experiments. Her eyes shone with the promise of something he didn't quite fully understand. Although they had been best friends for as long as they could walk, he never was able to fully understand Sakura. No matter how hard he tried. There was always a barrier between them. It had been the main reason why the crush he had had on her so many years ago fizzled out so easily. They were meant to be friends, best friends. Almost brother and sister-like, but definitely not romantic. Are you finally taking the class your dad has been begging you to take? Her voice woke him out of his trance. Yeah, I mean I put it off for as long as I could, no use now. He shrugged, but inside he felt helpless. This class would certainly mean his acceptance to his fate. A future he couldn't choose for himself. That's fair. Well, this is me. She pointed to a building that was bland. He nodded at her while watching a well-dressed redhead walk in after her. He looked intimidating. Shrugging, he walked away. Sakura could handle herself amongst her competition. Hina, a sandy blonde, screeched happily. I am so fucking sick of hanging around them, I swear. She continued to talk loudly, clearly fed up with her companions. Hinata let her amusement show in the form of laughter, airy and quiet. Nay Tamari, none of them really speak. The comment hung silently, challenging every single one of the members of their squad to argue. None did. Tamari sighed. That's exactly why I'm so sick of them. Sasuke sulks, she spoke, pointing an elongated finger at him. When Neji speaks it's condescending as fuck. She continued, now moving her finger towards a long light brown-haired boy, the same height as Sasuke. His pale light eyes narrowed in annoyance. And don't even get me started on Gaara. She warned, placing a careless arm around a red head, teal eyes looking as bored as ever at his sister's outburst. I'd never think I would see the day that I say this, but I miss Kiba. At that Hinata smiled fondly, she too missed Kiba. She really wished he wouldn't have spent an extra week in that exchange photography program out of country. If we're not good enough, then why don't you fuck off? The words were bitter, a common level of annoyance for Sasuke. Tamari didn't budge, she waved her hand dismissively at his rude tone. Hinata, she explained, she is the only reason I put up with your stoic asses. She reasoned mostly to herself and laughed as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. Hinata loved Tamari. They had been friends since they were children, really the only girlfriend she had ever had. Her boisterous and blunt personality had given Hinata a great deal of confidence in her youth, something she would always be thankful for. She also had a great sense of style, it was her own. Today, for instance, she wore dark jeans with slits at the knees, a chunky red belt and matching red ankle boots. Her shirt was an off-white, it hung loosely off one shoulder and reached barely past her belly button, allowing some skin to be exposed between the high rise of her jeans and the shirt. She made sure to wear a small red jacket. I'm honored. Hinata beamed, placing a dramatic hand at her heart. The group burst out in laughter. She looked back at her friends, silently taking in what they were wearing while wishing it wasn't protocol for her to do so. Sasuke was the easiest to spot. His hair, while spiked in the back and loose in the front, was easy to see due to his height. He wore ridiculously baggy navy blue jeans, a black and white long-sleeved sweatshirt on top. He hung his pack off one shoulder, it was a violent red. His left sleeve was rolled up to expose the many tattoos he had down his arm. Neji's jeans were a faded light blue. They were ripped at the knees much like Temari's. He also wore a plain beige long-sleeved shirt. It had a very simple design of a yin-yang sign on the front. He wore his trademark white bandana across his forehead and most of his long hair was tied in a low ponytail behind him. Neji actually wore his brown backpack appropriately. Gaara was easy to tell apart because of his hair. It was a fiery red. She actually found Gaara to be attractive. Not that she would ever mention that to Tamari. The older blonde would be making fun of her non-stop. His outfit consisted of tight navy jeans and a black dress shirt tucked in. He was the type to bring a cross bag instead of a backpack so that hung off to his left. I'm kind of glad classes this year are so minimal, Gaara spoke. Yeah, we have quite a bit of free time compared to last year. Hinata agreed with a smile. She had barely made it through last year without a mental breakdown. Seems like the same shit to me. Sasuke argued and grasped Hinata's hand. I'm starving though, you guys coming for lunch? It didn't even sound like a question, but the rest followed suit. The university campus had many lunch spots, however, every semester they always had to find a new one. Sasuke, Neji and Gaara were constantly hounded by what Temari called fangirls. It was bothersome to say the least and an absolutely fuckery of annoyance. According to Temari, to say the most. Uchiha and I found this lunch spot the last day of our last semester. Neji told them, as they followed Sasuke and Hinata. It really shouldn't have many unwanted people. They walked into a semi-opened area. The glass ceilings provided an exquisite view of the sky, the glass walls doing the same for the trees surrounding them. It was almost as if they were stuck inside of a snow globe. Beautiful. Sasuke and Neji smirked at Hinata's response. They knew she would love this place. Not to mention it was hidden so well within campus that it was almost always empty. There were exactly 3 round tables in the room. Each table could only accommodate a maximum of 8 people. Even if the room was full, there would only be 24 people in here. A stark contrast to their last lunch spot. It's perfect. Gaara sounded relieved and took a seat at one of the empty tables. Another table was currently occupied by what seemed like 4 people, 2 guys and 2 girls. All at once her friends turned to Hinata with big eyes. Laughing, she took out a bag that seemed to be specifically filled with food. We're late, Naruto. She was mad. He could tell. Yeah, I'm sorry Sakura, but I literally have classes across the campus. Maybe we should consider a new lunch spot? Something a bit closer? He pleaded, not that he didn't enjoy eating lunch there. It was incredibly peaceful, but if she was going to get mad at him every time he was late, then this was going to be a long semester. Just hurry up, she called, not outwardly rejecting his idea. He smirked. It would take a little convincing, but he was sure he could do it. Quickly and rather carelessly, Naruto opened the heavy glass door as Sakura rushed in before him. Sorry, he exclaimed boisterously, not at all caring that there might be other people in the room. He was smiling so big it made his eyes crinkle. A small gasp caught his attention and blue eyes opened swiftly. Instant recognition flashed through him as he openly gazed at the petite woman clearly having lunch with her friends. She wore a plain white long-sleeved turtleneck shirt, a gray skirt with straps that went above her shoulders and crisscrossed at her back. It ended about 3 centimeters before her dark gray thigh-length socks began. She wore a pair of knee-high black boots on top. Her normally pinned straight hair was slightly curled in a half-up, half-down look. Her pretty bangs still framed her doe-like eyes. He offhandedly wondered how it was possible for her to get more beautiful each time he saw her. A loud and harsh, troublesome, could be heard from one of his pals. It was enough to momentarily break eye contact between him and the girl. Fucking great. He heard the male he had seen with her at the coffee shop bite out. He was clearly pissed off at seeing the blonde. Sasuke. Hinata reprimanded, looking in a different direction than him. He found himself already missing her eyes on him, the warmth they inexplicably brought him. Charcoal eyes rolled in disdain and continued eating his lunch, leaving the rest of their friends in utter confusion. What the hell was that about? Sakura questioned, not one to sit back and take things as they were. That's the girl, Ino whispered low enough for only their friends to hear. That's the girl Naruto failed miserably at flirting with. Glee was apparent in her tone. It made 10-10, the most sane of his girlfriends, chuckle loudly. I didn't fail. Naruto began, recalling the disastrous event at the flower shop and then at the coffee shop. Okay, well, not miserably, he corrected. The entire table aside from Shikamaru laughed. He seemed to be the only one concerned. You hadn't mentioned she had so many friends. Naruto could tell there was some sort of hidden implication and glanced over at their table. The blonde seemed to be telling them a story, quite animatedly. Hinata seemed to be the only one truly paying attention. He smiled, he knew she was really kind. So what? They seemed protective. Again Shikamaru sounded concerned. Sakura was rudely staring at one of the other group's members. Oh, Naruto watched as recognition flashed through green eyes, no doubt finally identifying Mr. Dreamy. They were the ones at the cafe. Oh, holy shit, was she the reason you spilled coffee on your pants? She asked, obnoxiously loud. Naruto paled when every single person at the other table turned to stare at him. He laughed awkwardly to hide his embarrassment. "She's just kidding," he assured the strangers and elbowed Sakura behind his back. Shikamaru sighed in frustration and began to get up. "My class starts in 10. Not caring about the incredulous looks thrown his way, Naruto watched from the corner of his eye as Hinata got up shortly after Shikamaru. She spoke just loud enough for him to eavesdrop. "My class is starting pretty soon, so I really should get going." He still couldn't wrap his mind around her soft voice. "We'll walk you there." He heard a long-haired guy answer her, fleetingly looking towards who he assumed to be her boyfriend. Now he had known, from her admonishment earlier, his name was Sasuke. She shook her head telling them it wasn't necessary since it was nowhere in their general direction, but both stood up anyways. They did seem quite protective of her. They almost always ended up having lunch in the same room. He certainly no longer wanted to convince his friends to move spots, and plus Hinata's friends were actually decent company. Well, as decent as two groups of strangers could be. In the 3 weeks since school started he had learned many things about Hinata. He had learned that she was an engineering student much like Shikamaru. He had beamed very openly when his friend had told him. He knew she had to be amazing. He had also learned that she was taking some business classes because she had 2 classes with him. Well, he amended in his mind, her and who he came to know as Sasuke and Neji had 2 classes with him. Not that they ever let her out of their sights long enough for him to actually strike up a conversation. Sakura had also mentioned that she was taking one of her specialized classes about human anatomy. Apparently both Hinata and her red-haired companion were in that class. She was very versatile. It was a Friday today, he normally liked Fridays. Knowing he wouldn't have to drive such a long way for the next couple of days was nice. He had come to heavily dislike Fridays this year though, knowing he wouldn't be able to see her for the weekend bothered him. Bothered him to the point where he sluggishly woke up on Fridays now. He had left his last morning class a little early in order to not be late when he went to grab Sakura after her class on their way to lunch. He was not expecting her to be engaging in what seemed like a really friendly conversation with Hinata. Both girls seemed to be laughing so hard there were tears coming from their eyes, while the redhead, Gaara he believed his name to be, stood beside Hinata smirking. "Hey," he spoke up, picking up some speed to reach the group. He could already feel himself smiling broadly. "Hey Naruto, you know Hinata, right?" Sakura questioned rhetorically and then proceeded to point at the guy. "This is Gaara. They're both in my class so we figured we could walk to lunch together." "Nice to see you again, Naruto." His heart threatened to burst through his ribcage at hearing her say his name. He had never heard anyone say his name quite like that. "Yeah, you too Hinata." He was naturally loud but even he could tell that had been louder than he anticipated it to be. He watched as Gaara narrowed his teal, pupil-less eyes slightly. It made him gulp. "It's nice to officially meet you too, Gaara." "Likewise, Naruto." Meh, if he had to score it, it would be a 3 out of 10. Not that impressive, nowhere near as nice as Hinata saying his name. "You know I heard he actually ate a live frog once to see if it would do anything to his digestive tract." Sakura spoke and he watched mesmerized as Hinata's body shivered at the thought. "I think I would rather inject myself with frog DNA and find out that way." Sakura blew out a laugh he wasn't even sure came out of her. He watched as Gaara openly chuckled as well. Something about Hinata made them both comfortable enough to be vulnerable. He smiled. He didn't quite get the joke but man was he happy today. Fall had come and gone, now it was nearing the end of their semester. With December just having started, university students from all over were preparing for finals and written reports. "We're just going to stay late and study for our exams at the atrium, right?" Tamari questioned her friends on a Monday morning while Sasuke drove them to campus. "Yes," her brother responded. "I need to ask Sakura some questions." Hinata looked at him with interest. "She's incredibly smart," he admitted. Sasuke scoffed. "Smarter than you?" "In some ways," came the vague response. "Are they all staying late to study?" Lavender eyes looked almost pleadingly into teal for a response. Neji's eye twitched slightly at her tone. Gaara looked confused. "Am I supposed to know?" he asked, completely uncertain. Hinata knew he wasn't very good with social cues and shrugged good-naturedly. She didn't think before actually asking the question. "I suppose not. I was just curious." She feigned mild curiosity while noticing Tamari raise a knowing brow. It would be their last week of official classes before finals, and she had wanted to at least spend some time with the blonde boy. Over the past few months she had gotten to know him a lot better and realized she craved his attention. Fed off his smile, or the excited glitter in his eyes when he spoke about things he liked, things he loved. She wanted to know more, was dying to unravel the mystery that was Naruto. "We still have to hammer out that presentation for business," Sasuke spoke, gaining everyone's attention. "Obviously Naruto will have to be there for that at least. He's a lot smarter than I originally thought." Neji tuned in. From the carefree way he acts I assumed he was an idiot. Hinata didn't know why she suddenly felt the need to stand up for him. Because Naruto was most certainly not an idiot. If anything, he had been the one to explain difficult concepts to her that neither Neji nor Sasuke had been able to explain to her. "Maybe you shouldn't go around making assumptions, brother." Neji looked back at her absolutely stunned. Pale white collided with light lavender. She held his gaze, silently letting him know she would not back down from this one. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he faced the front, muttering a quiet, "I guess." Hinata walked into her highest-level engineering class tired from that morning's car ride. She almost never opposed her brother, but something about how openly he expressed disdain towards Naruto irked her to no end. "Hey Hinata." She heard a bored voice call out to her. Looking towards her normal seat, she saw Shikamaru lazily lift up a hand in greeting. "Ah, Shikamaru, you're early." She beamed up at him while she spoke. He was almost always late, it was always her who saved him a seat in class. Brown eyes looked at her somewhat calculatedly and her smile fell. Sometimes she got the feeling that Shikamaru didn't like her. But then just as suddenly he chuckled softly and shrugged as a response, pulling out her chair for her to take her spot. "Most of us are going to spend a lot of time studying at the atrium for the next couple of weeks in preparation." Hinata spoke up again, pulling out her notebook, pointedly not looking at Shikamaru. From her peripheral she saw him nod slightly for her to continue. "This class is probably the hardest one for me. If you want, we can study together." She sounded incredibly uncertain, even to her own ears. She knew how smart he was, highly doubted that he would need her help in studying, but she always figured two brains were better than one. A decent amount of time passed by without him moving, or even blinking for that matter. It stressed her out. Had she offended him? "Yeah, that sounds like a good plan. I'll take you up on the offer," he finally answered, seemingly unfazed with how long it took him to respond. Hinata nodded in response, not bothering to say anything else. "This will be your last day of class," their professor confessed. "Your final will be cumulative, so I figured I would be nice and give you extra study time. Don't bother coming to class unless it's to study with your peers, I won't be here. Feel free to email me any questions." Hinata grimaced and looked straight into Shikamaru's similar expression. Looks like they both had quite a bit of studying to do. It had become a semester ritual for Naruto to leave his last class before lunch a few minutes early and jog to meet up with Sakura, Hinata and Gaara. More times than not he and Hinata would walk slightly slower than their companions and chat amongst themselves. They were the best 10 minutes of his day. "Hinata," he yelled excitedly while he neared her. He could tell her apart regardless of her jacket, messy high bun and earmuffs. She looks so cute. His heart thudded against his ribcage in total excitement. "Naruto." She reciprocated his excitement in her own sweet way, making both Gaara and Sakura pensively look at the scene unfolding. "Hi to you too, Naruto," Sakura spoke, sarcasm heavy. "Ah," the blonde began, hand already rubbing the back of his scarf. "Hey Sakura, Gaara." He sounded nothing as excited as he had just a minute ago. His pink-haired friend scoffed in response, completely ignoring his statement. "Hina, Shikamaru mentioned you and him were going to study in the atrium the next few days to prepare for finals." Bright green eyes looked over at her as Sakura spoke. Her pink hair could be seen from the tip of her dark gray toque, and not for the first time she noted how pretty Sakura was. Yes, molecular engineering is, well, as Sasuke would say, fucking hard," she admitted, looking almost bashful at using such language. Impossibly sky-blue eyes lightened up in absolute mirth at hearing her speak, and he laughed openly at her bashful nature. Gaara, seemingly following his lead, laughed as well. Sakura placed an arm around her shoulder and chuckled at her friend. "I was hoping I could join in on the study session? I have a lot of questions about this anatomy class both you and Gaara would probably be able to help me with." Oh, yes, of course, Sakura. I figured both of our friend groups would just study together and help each other out. Hinata lifted her gaze towards Naruto and he felt the breath leave him instantly. Vulnerability was always something that was frowned upon within their compound. It was dangerous. On her though, it was stunning. You know I'm in, despite how mean Neji and Sasuke can be, they are incredibly smart. Not to mention you, Hinata, I would be crazy not to accept your help. Naruto winked cheekily at her as he spouted the words, feeling accomplished and flirty. It was short-lived however, as Gaara had walked right between them and slightly pushed Hinata forward, casually accelerating their pace towards the atrium to meet up with the rest of their friends. He heard Sakura blow out a laugh at his useless attempt to impress the brunette and shoved her carelessly while catching up to their companions. For the following weeks, two sets of friends could be seen day and night studying religiously. More often than not, they would be divided into mini-cliques in order to study for certain finals. Sakura and Gaara were always sitting together. Hinata would join when they studied for anatomy. Neji, Sasuke and Naruto all sat together as well, seeing as they shared almost every single class. Periodically Naruto would watch Neji move closer to Tenten and ask her some questions regarding a class they shared. He didn't care enough to find out what the class actually was. He also often noticed Ino and who he had come to know as Kiba sitting together. Although they did not share a degree in common, both of their respective careers required so much creativity that they fed off each other. Shino seemed to never want to study with any of them, but since he shared the same degree as Temari, they almost always studied side by side. Lastly, there was Hinata and Shikamaru. Somehow Hinata had been able to borrow a huge whiteboard on wheels and they did most of their calculations on there. If he thought Shikamaru and Hinata were smart before, these past couple of weeks had taught him that he had not truly known just how intelligent his friends were. Because yes, at this point he most certainly considered Hinata to be his friend. Amusedly he watched Sasuke look towards the two, solving some sort of math equation that looked like absolute bullshit to him. You ever feel dumb compared to your sister? Neji looked up scandalized by such a statement. No, he spit out venomously towards Sasuke. Briefly he looked up at what he was talking about. A single equation took up most of the board, and although Shikamaru looked just about ready to lose his mind, Hinata calmly walked him through the steps, eventually getting him to the correct answer. Naruto watched all of this in amazement, pride filling him up in a way he hadn't known was possible. Sometimes, Naruto heard Neji speak again and laughed loudly at the admittance, earning a scowl from said man. Shikamaru could run circles around all of us in terms of intelligence, so it's really refreshing to see someone beat him out, even if only for one question. The blonde's voice held nothing but amusement. At that he heard Sasuke laugh too, catching him slightly by surprise. Today was the last day for Hinata's finals. All other finals had gone well, she felt. However, today would be the toughest day for her. Not only did she have her molecular engineering final with Shikamaru, but she also had the presentation for her business class with Neji, Sasuke and Naruto. Hinata had never liked public speaking, so both were stressing her out for very different reasons. She had told her friends that she would be driving herself to university today. She wanted to get there extra early to have time to at least review some harder concepts before her final. She didn't know if she would ever feel truly prepared for this final, but she would certainly try her best. Throughout the last few weeks she had been even more enamored with Naruto's personality, his never giving up mantra. In moments of absolute weakness she would recall tips he had given her for the classes she shared with him and instantly shaped up. No one had ever had that type of effect on her. She could feel how, as Sasuke would put it, fucked she truly was in terms of her feelings for him. They had bloomed so quickly and they hadn't stopped growing ever since. She grimaced slightly as she parked in one of the empty university lots. There had been so much snow on the ground already, it being mid-December. She liked the snow, it was extremely beautiful, but she knew how much damage it could do in a city like Konoha where snow typically did not occur in abundance. It appeared this year it would be different. She opened up the heavy doors to the atrium and breathed out, dropping her bag, books and coat. Not even 10 minutes had passed before the door opened once more, jolting her. It was too early for any of her friends to be there yet. Pale lavender eyes looked up blankly only to be met with cerulean. The smile that bloomed across her features was completely uncontrollable. Though, Naruto appeared to be in more shock than she was. Hey Naruto. She decided to speak, if only to break the silence that had encompassed them. She watched the enthusiastic boy shake off the surprise and respond in greeting with a grin that took up most of his face. She loved this smile. "What are you doing here so early?" she heard him ask, taking a seat in front of her. She wasn't entirely sure, but concern seemed to lace his voice, for what she did not know. "Molecular engineering," she responded with a slight shrug. "It's so challenging. I just wanted to review some stuff before the final this morning." She had no problems in telling him her issues, her insecurity regarding this class. Something about him always put her at ease. Insecurities, vulnerability and generally emotions were frowned upon at the compound. They seemed to eat people alive, changing them to a point beyond recognition, guided them so far from a path that they ended up sacrificing missions. She was not allowed such luxuries, but she wanted them. She saw no harm in having them with Naruto. He didn't know, had no clue who she really was, who she was expected to be. He shot her a sympathetic look and nodded to show her his understanding. "You're the most hard-working person I've ever met." He sounded so incredibly sure, steadfast. "You're going to do well," he assured again, no shred of doubt. She was entirely thankful for this, for the vote of confidence she very rarely received at home. Timidly she peered at him. Blue eyes shone with gentility and sincerity, enough to leave her absolutely breathless. "Breathe." "Ah, thank you Naruto." They spent a couple hours studying together, words of encouragement shared along the way. It felt natural to her, more natural than studying with Sasuke or her brother. She liked this more. She was able to laugh, to openly feel joy. She exuded enough emotion with him that would have had Neji rolling his eyes in disgust. She cherished the subtle glances, the shared smiles and the lingering touches. It all elicited so many emotions within her heart. She never was one to run away from her emotions, no matter what her compound had taught her. And now, being here with Naruto, a warmth so unlike anything she had ever experienced encompassed her entire being. Although she knew he would never truly be hers. "I didn't know you and Neji were siblings." Naruto's voice was filled with so much curiosity she had to look up while putting her book away. She was about ready to head over to the engineering building. She heard herself say. "We're actually twins," she clarified, knowing that most people wouldn't discern that information independently. They were just too different. Blonde tousled locks moved as he whipped his head to look at her in what she assumed was disbelief. It took a lot of self-control not to laugh at the face he was making. "No fucking way," he exclaimed loudly. "There's no way you're twins." "Ah, I know we're quite different." She saw him open his mouth, no doubt to express just how differently he saw them. "But we did share a womb for 9 months, so," she let her words die on her lips as she finally released a laugh. "Naruto, you look like you're going to pop a blood vessel. I can show you our birth certificates if you would like." Suddenly he smiled, and then laughed. Loudly, just the way she liked. The type of laugh that made his chest heave. "I might need that proof." He agreed, and suddenly she laughed too. "But, I guess there are more pressing matters today." A tan arm was held out in front of her, offering her assistance to get up from her seat. She didn't need the help, but she would be absolutely crazy not to accept the offer. Jolts of electricity flooded her skin as soon as she made contact, a feeling she hadn't ever felt before. "Can I walk you to your final?" he spoke again, hand letting go once she was completely upright. "As long as it's not troublesome." He blew out a laugh, muttering something about how she was hanging around Shikamaru too much, and opened the door for her to walk out of the atrium. It only took a few minutes to get to the designated building. They watched in surprise as a brown-haired boy stood there waiting for them. "You're on time?" Hinata heard the genuine surprise in Naruto's voice and smiled. "Yeah, well, I need the whole time to maybe finish the test," Shikamaru spoke. She could tell he was as nervous as she felt. In a bout of confidence, only standing beside Naruto could probably provide. She grinned cheekily up at him. "Nay, Shika." Both males' eyebrows rose at her use of the nickname, but she continued unfazed. "We're the top 2 students in that class. If we failed, that means everyone else undoubtedly did even worse." She took a quick breath before continuing. "In that case, the bell curve will really help us out and we end up with an A anyways." Her logic was sound. She knew he knew that too. Brown eyes shifted up to look at Naruto while lighting a cigarette. Hinata could tell they were speaking without words, and she very desperately wanted to know what was said, but she held her tongue. "I told you so." Naruto finally spoke up, boasting about something Hinata was not privy to. She pouted while looking at the ground. She wanted to be that close with Naruto. To be able to have conversations with just a look. I guess so. Shikamaru answered back after a while, letting the half-smoked cigarette drop and stomping carelessly on it. Alright Hinata, it's time we ace this shit then. His shoulders seemed nowhere close to as tense as they had been when she first arrived, and she smiled, glad that she could help him out a bit. God knows he had been a saving grace for her this semester. Hinata turned slightly, looking up into a beautifully whiskered face. She waved goodbye as she started to walk inside with Shikamaru, something akin to heat pooling in her stomach at the look he was directing at her. Naruto was so incredibly charming, she really did not think she had ever stood a chance against her growing sentiments. Then Naruto did something completely unexpected. He pulled her wrist back towards him, effectively knocking her off balance, and steadied her as she drew closer to his warmth. One strong arm encircled her waist while the other tucked a strand of her hair behind her ear. She was sure he could see how flustered she felt. She didn't think her eyes could go any more wide than they currently were. He chuckled softly at her expense, and due to their proximity Hinata felt it vibrate through his chest. "You're perfect, you know." He certainly had not phrased it as a question, and she felt her insides melt, completely enthralled by his words, his proximity. "Just him. Let's go." Shikamaru spoke behind her, causing her head to turn to him. He looked slightly surprised, but nowhere near as surprised as she felt. "Good luck." He had whispered it so low she would have missed it were it not for the fact that she was literally glued to his chest. She felt a feather-like kiss placed on her cheek, and suddenly the warmth was gone. "Good luck to you too, genius." Those were the last words he spoke before walking away from both of them, leaving shocked pale lavender and irritated chocolate brown eyes staring at his back. "How'd your final go?" Naruto heard Sasuke whisper to Hinata while they waited their turn to present. She beamed and gave him a thumbs up. "Ah, so fucking cute." He had to look away hastily, doubting he could control the blush rising to his cheeks. He had been thinking about her all day. As opposed to? He heard himself question internally. Well, more so than usual. He looked over to his right at Neji, whose eyes were already on him. "Shit, you better not fuck this up, Naruto." He could hear the accusatory tone brimming behind his stoic voice. "I still can't believe you're her twin," he muttered under his breath. "What was that?" "I said, I still can't believe you don't think we'll win," he decided to respond instead. His usual air of confidence surrounded him. He would not let Neji take this from him, from her. For the past couple of weeks Hinata had confided a lot in him, letting him know that she would much rather die than partake in public speaking. Unfortunately for her, one of the classes they shared required an end-of-term presentation. It had been some stupid task to win a debate. Business law was the one class he absolutely fucking despised. The one class his father had begged, even forced him to take. But now it was almost over. They had spent so much time preparing for different possibilities, things the other team would argue against them in an attempt to win. He wasn't willing to let her down. Hinata had impeccable grades he came to learn while studying for finals. She had pulled out various assignments for different classes to review, and not a single mark fell below a 97. He had been surprised, not because he didn't think she deserved it, but because it had seemed almost entirely impossible to upkeep with school to the point where your GPA stayed a constant 4.0. "I know molecular engineering is hard, but this is the class one don't think'll survive," she had told him once, near the start of the semester. So he had made it a point to explain things to her when she looked overwhelmed, when neither Sasuke or Neji could help. He took pride in being the only one who had found a way to explain difficult concepts to her. Now she looked at him, a tight-lipped smile, eyes shining with nerves. Even now she's breathtaking. Putting those troublesome thoughts away, he showed her a genuine smile. He would make sure this class was a success for her. "We won?" Hinata had sounded so surprised it made him chuckle. "Did you think we would lose?" he playfully retorted, well aware of Sasuke and Neji standing behind them, no doubt eavesdropping. "Yes." It wasn't Hinata's voice that responded. Neji walked up to him, something like gratitude lurking in opalescent eyes. "If it weren't for you Naruto, we would have lost the debate." He spoke with sincerity, causing discomfort to bloom in Naruto's chest. He hadn't done it for him. Yeah, it wasn't a big deal. It had been though, he had spent the better part of a week and a half solely focused on hypothesizing all the different possible arguments the other group could potentially throw at them. It seemed like his hard work had paid off. The argument brought up had not been one that their team had discussed amongst each other, solely because it seemed unlikely that the team had evidence to back up the claim. Except they had found evidence and it had been brought up. Naruto had taken the slightest of pleasure in watching both Neji and Sasuke pale, desperately and quickly trying to come up with a retort. And then there had been Hinata, who had widened her iridescent eyes an unreal degree. She almost looked proud of the other team for coming up with such an argument, and not for the first time since he's met her he realized she was way too kind for her own good. Still, winning this debate guaranteed them all very high marks and he would not let her down. So calmly, and somewhat eloquently, as Hinata had tried to show him during their practice debates, he countered their point effortlessly. Already having found, through research, the perfect case to dispel theirs. It had been an easy win after that. You were incredible, Naruto. He heard the softness behind her tone, eyes so bright and staring right into his soul. He could do nothing but stare. Butterflies bloomed in the pit of his stomach and seemed to get caught in his throat as he attempted to wave off her praise. It elicited way too much emotion in him. Good job, Dobi. The nickname was nothing new, but the fondness behind it startled him coming from Sasuke. Still, he couldn't bring himself to look anywhere but at her. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she looked away, making him frown. He wanted her to look at him like that. Like he was a beacon of light in an eternal darkness. He wanted to be that for her. He grimaced. What the fuck am I saying? I literally just met her last summer. I heard you didn't suck, idiot. He recognized that voice anywhere. Before he could fully turn to look at Sakura, a palm slapped his ass, laughter echoing all around him. Good job, Naruto. Tenten spoke in between spouts of laughter at his incredulous look. That's how athletes say good job. She pointlessly pointed out. Tenten was an incredibly talented athlete. There were very few people who were as adept to their surroundings as Tenten. From the corner of his eye he noticed Neji cover up a smirk. He didn't like the way White Eyes had been looking at Tenten lately, but he knew better than to try and get involved. Hinata, can I ride home with you? Temari's voice was soft, a lot softer than he had grown used to. He noticed Shikamaru wasn't anywhere near them. He was supposed to give him a ride home. Was Shika with you? His question had been directed at Temari, though she looked just as surprised as he felt for asking her. I saw him near the engineering building. He said he had one last final and would meet up after. He noticed Hinata look intrigued, almost as if she hadn't expected Temari to know. But then again, why had he expected her to know? Thanks, he responded, a grateful smile plastered on his face. I should go find him, he's riding back with me. He told them, even though no one had really asked. We'll walk with you, my car is parked in that direction. Hinata added, seemingly happy to be walking with him. He shook himself slightly, urging his heart to settle down while nodding at her. We'll meet you back home. Sasuke's voice held authority. Gaara and Kiba are already there. He saw Hinata nod in understanding and wave them off, going up to Sakura and Tenten. We're still on for next weekend, right? Green eyes shone with excitement as she spoke. Ah, yes. Temari and I are looking forward to seeing you three. Hinata beamed and he felt a pang of jealousy that her smile wasn't directed at him. Text me tomorrow? Girl, you know we will. That group chat will never die down. Tenten spoke up, mirth apparent on her facial features. You can leave that up to Ino. Sakura, Hinata and Temari chuckled along with her, and suddenly Naruto was hit with a wave of relief. She had become friends with his friends. She was incredibly well liked by them. In fact, even Shino had mentioned he enjoyed her presence. Ready? She turned back to spare him a glance. He had barely noticed he was the one to speak. She hummed in agreement, waving one final time to her friends. Sasuke and Neji looked as menacing as ever, but it died down as soon as Sakura and Tenten spoke in their direction. It didn't take long for the three of them to find Shikamaru, lighting a cigarette right outside the engineering building. You know, for someone so goddamn smart you sure are an idiot. Temari had absolutely no qualms in calling him out. What a drag, came the bored response. Nonetheless he put it out and waved them over. Hinata giggled at the exchange while he looked incredulously toward his best friend. Oh shoot. Midnight blue hair framed a frowning face as she stuck her tiny hands in multiple pockets. I can't find my car keys. She sounded worried. You didn't have them during our final this morning. Shikamaru provided. How do you? Naruto began to ask but discarded it as soon as he caught sight of Chocolate Eyes, narrowing in an attempt to shut him up. Maybe you left them at the atrium? We were there most of the morning, he said instead. She perked up at his idea. That's right. You're so clever, Naruto, she complimented. Tamari, it's snowing incredibly heavily. I'll run over to find my keys so you don't have to walk any more than you should in this weather. Then she turned to look at the guys. Do you mind keeping her company until I come back? It's already pretty late and dark out. He saw Shikamaru nod, not a hint of an argument on the tip of his tongue. He had a complaint though. Nay, Hinata. Like you said, it's dark and late already. How about I go and help you look for your keys? 2 sets of eyes are better than 1? Why had he sounded so insecure at his offered help? She brightened even more. That would be so helpful, thank you. He breathed out in relief at her acceptance of spending even more time with him. He was starting to realize he absolutely feared her rejection more than anything he had feared in the past. It's cold, Tamari, and I will go inside the engineering building and wait for you to come back. He pointedly looked at both of them. Naruto took comfort in knowing Shika had agreed with him. Hinata answered nonchalantly, looking back at Tamari for approval. The older female nodded her consent. The snow had only gotten worse in their attempt to reach the atrium. Naruto was barely able to open the door. He didn't even want to imagine Hinata trying to do this on her own. The atrium was incredibly high-tech. LED light fixtures illuminated it while the door locked in cases of emergency. Though, most of the doors on campus did that. A voice disrupted his thoughts and he glanced towards who was undoubtedly Hinata. I found them. She looked so relieved that he smiled. She was really too cute for her own good. Thank for your help, Naruto. Her smile was massive, it's a smile he saw often. He chuckled bashfully. I didn't do much, he admitted while shrugging. Though he did take a step closer, wanting to feel her in his arms just as he had that morning, when he boldly kissed her. She didn't step back and again he was floored with how relieved he felt at her acceptance of this closeness. Before he could fully encircle her waist, an alarm rang amidst them. Emergency storm. Please stay indoors. Do not leave the premises. All locks will be automatically set in 15, 14, 13, 12. He watched his surroundings shocked as the automated voice counted down to 0. The normal lights flickered off and emergency dim lights took their place. He walked over to the door and pulled, it wouldn't budge. Hinata, I think we're stuck. He sounded nothing akin to panicked, but he expected a reaction out of her. She probably wasn't used to being in any emergency situations. She surprised him by sighing heavily and letting her coat slump to the floor with her pack. She was nowhere near as panicked as he assumed she would be. You good? He questioned, not at all convinced by her demeanor. Yeah, I'm fine. She waved a hand dismissively at his question. You okay? She retorted, once again catching him by surprise. He couldn't help the laugh that escaped him, it was hollow. I'm used to being in shitty situations. He noticed her eyebrows rise in curiosity or suspicion. He wasn't quite certain yet. But, it's not every day I get stuck in them with someone I want to be. A very pretty blush overtook the bridge of her nose and he watched completely transfixed as it spread like wildfire across her cheeks to the tips of her ears. Had he always had this effect on her? Probably not. She was way too good for someone the likes of him. It was probably due to the sheer absurd situation they were in. He thought he heard a phone buzz and simultaneously he watched Hinata pick up hers. Neji, she greeted, rather stoically he noted. She chanced to look at him and smiled slightly, deciding to put the phone on speaker. Did you make it out? Not exactly, she responded, her voice held more softness now. Alright. Where are you and Tamari? I'll see if we can come get you. A lot of the buildings at Konoha were connected by passageways. Well, she hesitated, he realized almost immediately why. Tamari is actually in the engineering building with Shikamaru. Hinata's response was as honest as it could be. I'm in the atrium. She finished speaking, a little breathless. The atrium was for all intents and purposes a snow globe in a forested area, not connected to any other buildings. Why are you on your own? Neji seemed to be trying to yell while whispering at the same time, probably not trying to rise panic wherever he was. Suddenly anger flared up in his heart. How dare Neji think he would leave Hinata alone? She's not alone. He shouted back at the phone before truly analyzing his words. I beg your pardon? The stoic voice sounded just on the verge of anger now. Yeah brother. Naruto is here with me. Why? Now Neji was shouting and he could tell Hinata was annoyed. I lost my keys, he was nice enough to come find them with me and then the lockdown occurred. So really it's my fault he's stuck. She looked sadly up at him. Was that guilt he saw lurking behind her gaze? It's really okay Hinata, I wanted to help you. Plus, I'm glad I'm here. I wouldn't want you going through this alone. Bashfully he rubbed the back of his neck with his left hand. He wasn't very good at expressing these types of emotions. I see. He had completely forgotten about Neji. The doors are sealed shut, the same with all the windows, we're stuck at least until the storm dies down. Hinata nodded and a second later realized Neji wouldn't be able to tell. Yes, I figured as much. Are you and Sasuke okay? Yes, we're still in the business building, with Tenten and Sakura. The admittance had Naruto sighing in relief. He had been very nervous about Sakura and Tenten heading back in this type of weather. Can you let them know I'm good? My phone isn't with me. Yeah, Naruto we can hear you. Just take care of Hinata okay? Typical Sakura to be so upfront. Seriously, did they all find him incapable of doing something so important? Ah, Sakura. Naruto is being very nice, there is no need to remind him. He has taken very good care of me. Naruto felt himself blush at her words. Anyways, he heard Sasuke cut in. Save your phone battery, tell Tamari we're fine too. If anything happens just call us. Got it, she responded and quickly hung up, already dialing another number. Hey Hinata, I've been trying to reach you. Sorry Temi, I was on the phone with Neji and Sasuke. Are you and Shikamaru alright? Yeah, lazy ass and I are stuck in the most boring building but whatever. I guess we'll just wait it out until morning. By the way, I have the blonde idiot's phone. It must have fallen out of his pocket earlier. Ah, that would explain that. Okay, let me know if anything happens. And take care of my phone. Naruto added, not entirely happy at being called an idiot but letting it slide considering the situation at hand. Will do, night. Try to keep warm out there, you and Naruto might have to end up using body heat at this point. T. Tamari. Hinata's tone was reprimanding though she seemed to look as flushed as he felt. You're too goddamn crude. Naruto berated and heard her laugh on the other end. Bye, he spoke up again effectively ending the call. He was too flustered to deal with her teasing right now. Naruto? The voice stirred him awake slightly. Looking down he was able to see the top of Hinata's midnight hair. She was comfortably lying on his chest. At some point during the night they had decided to use their coats as a blanket to lie on, which meant they had to use each other for warmth. Much like Tamari had joked about. So now here they were, it was nearing 1 a.m. and he had never slept as well as he had with this petite girl safely tucked under his chin. He absolutely adored the feeling of her, how his body seemed to engulf hers. I just wanted to say that. Well I guess I just. He waited patiently for her to finish her sentence, although he had begun to twirl the ends of her long hair to let her know he was in fact listening. I just feel really safe with you so thank you. It had come out so rushed it took his brain a few seconds to register what she had actually said. And he felt it, again. The constricting in his chest, the shallowness of a breath he couldn't quite let out. The tingling sensation that started off in the pit of his stomach and spread like wildfire across his entire body. I'm sorry if that's a weird thing to say. He heard again, this time her voice was barely above a whisper, it seemed to tremble past her lips. You know, my family and friends really care about me. He began to speak, her body stiffened in response. He slightly wondered if she had been expecting him to chastise her for saying such an amazing thing. He promptly ignored that thought with a small frown and continued speaking. I know I'm important to them, but... He was hesitating now, not entirely sure if he wanted her to know what he was about to share with her. He absolutely loathed discussing this side of his life. It would for sure drive her clear out of his lane. Not that she was in it to begin with. He couldn't quite wrap his head around how Hinata, the girl who was always protected by Neji, Sasuke, Gaara, Kiba and Tamari would feel safe around him, in his arms. It was perplexing, unfathomable. Dainty fingers distracted his train of thought. He felt them glide along his jawline, causing goosebumps to bloom every place her fingers traced. It seemed almost ridiculous how quickly his body reacted to her touch, her voice, her presence. She was sitting up now, straddling his legs while her fingers continued to move slowly, almost agonizingly slow. They halted at his chin and he was finally able to break free from the trance she had unknowingly trapped him in. He could clearly see big, lilac eyes widen at her own courage. It was comical how shy she could be. He really wished he could read her mind, to know exactly what she was thinking. "Of course you're important to your family and friends," she assured, "but—" He cleared his throat, desperately trying not to let the blood rush to his face or anywhere close to his pants, though she was really making this rather difficult. "But no one really feels safe with me," he admitted quietly. "Oh? How come? All of your friends seem very comfortable in your presence." "Ah, yeah, comfort and safety are different?" He wasn't sure how he was actually going to broach this subject with her. She had willingly gotten this close with him physically and emotionally. And now, he was surely going to ruin that. He watched with a small lopsided grin as her eyes narrowed and a cute pout adorned her features. She was clearly thinking about his rhetorical question. Instead of speaking though, the fingers that were delicately placed on his chin moved to his right cheek. Again he was enthralled by her actions, not daring to move even an inch. He felt a warm palm cup his cheek and then it happened. Purposefully, her thumb gently brushed over his whisker marks. It took every ounce of self-control not to shiver at her touch. Naruto's eyes widened, that feeling was certainly new. "They're smooth?" He heard her question, though he could tell by the immediate blush that followed that she had not intended to speak aloud. He couldn't help but chuckle at her expense. "It's all those face masks Ino and Sakura make me do, you know?" He was only half kidding, but she giggled anyways, sweet and soft. He wouldn't even begin to try and decipher the feelings that bloomed when he heard her laugh. They weren't worth the amount of time it would take him to figure them out. Not right now, at least, not when he had her right in front of him. Not when there was no one else around, not when he didn't have to hold back. "They're not birthmarks though." It sounded like Hinata was talking to herself now, trying to solve an equation. Her left hand joined her right and cupped his other cheek to brush along the whiskers on that side of his tanned face. This time he had to fist the jacket under him to stop himself from letting them roam across her back. "No," he agreed. So, they're scars." This didn't sound like a question, and it took him by surprise how she could get to answers as quickly as she did. He was about to respond before a blinding smile overtook her features. He had no idea what had warranted such a smile, but it elicited one of his own, completely bashful and content. Even if they were discussing a topic he hated beyond anything else, it felt okay. It felt all right because it was with her. Just as quickly as her smile appeared, it left her porcelain face. A serious expression overtaking her features. Even now she looked so incredibly stunning. The hands that had been on his cheeks left as well. Pale, thin arms drew back to protectively hover over where her heart would be. He watched her chest rise and fall a few times before Hinata began to unbutton her blouse. "What?" was all he managed to croak out in his desperate and sudden breathlessness before she pinned him with her gaze. Her eyebrows creased in an attempt to get him to understand, and he did. So he kept quiet and nodded at her to continue. She only loosened 2 buttons before sliding the shirt to expose her left clavicle and part of her cleavage. There was a scar that began fairly close to the top of her S and ended across her shoulder blade. It almost looked like it wrapped around to the back as well. This time he couldn't help himself when his hand instinctively went to trace the gruesome mark. It looked so out of place on a body like hers, so milky white and pure. He wanted desperately to ask where she had received that from, because this was no ordinary scar. He knew from the many years of training at the compound what different wounds and scars looked like, what they were caused by. It was jagged and had been deep. He could tell from the way her tissue had tried to heal over it. It had been deliberate. Someone had done that to her. Had more than likely tried to assassinate her with a dagger. It infuriated him, how someone could hurt Hinata. How someone thought they had a right to do that. Who? The question was short and aggressively asked. He could feel himself losing control of his emotions. By now his eyes were sure to be red. She didn't answer. Instead she snaked his wondering hand and brought it up to her cheek. Sneakily she placed a kiss atop one of his fingers and let him settle it there. Just as suddenly as his anger had come, it dissipated, leaving him feeling empty. "I don't think that matters, the way it doesn't matter who left you with those." Her voice was as soft as always, the graceful smile he was used to back on her face. "This made me who I am." He nodded in agreement. He knew what she was saying. The day he had received those scars had changed his entire life, had altered it to a point where he felt almost as if reborn. Why don't you think people feel safe around you? Although random, he couldn't stop himself from answering her question quickly and honestly. Because when I lose control of my emotions, I'm out for blood, I don't care whose. He had fully expected her to flinch at his response, to pull away from his embrace, because somehow with one hand on her cheek he had found the courage to place the other along the back of her waist. He had been the one effectively keeping her in place. What Naruto did not expect was for an airy laugh to blow past her lips. For her to say, "I think we're entitled to lose it sometimes. I can't imagine the pain those must have caused, must still cause." And from that he knew that she understood. The memory still hurt, the damage was fresh even if the scars were not. Things like these took an eternity to heal from. Maybe it was coming to that understanding that prompted him to explain. "I lost my mother the same day I got these. She was killed by the same knife that carved them. I had tried to save her, but she ended up sacrificing her life for mine." He heard Hinata inhale sharply, a hint of sympathy lurking behind opalescent eyes. But even then, he could still see the mutual understanding. Like she knew exactly how he felt. "You lost your mom to the knife that gave you yours too." It wasn't worded as a question. He didn't have to ask because he knew. She responded. "I'm avidly trying to stop Neji from finding the man and killing him." The severity of the statement sounded so completely contradicting to her nonchalant tone. So much so that Naruto found himself choking on his own spit. "Ah, I'm sorry, Naruto." "Too much?" "No," Naruto admitted. "I've just always wanted to kill the man who took my mom." "I can see the merit," she nodded softly, letting him know she was not judging him. "It just won't change anything for me, you know? Like, my mother is dead. The scar is already there, it will always be there. Nothing I do will change that. No one I kill will change that. So what's the point in bringing more hatred into the world?" Amazed. He was completely amazed by her. Here stood a girl who probably held the same negative emotions he did. The same ones that had driven him time after time to hurt anyone within 5 meters of him. And yet this girl, this tiny little mouse of a girl, could handle them with more finesse than he could ever dream was possible. He wanted to know, wanted to be able to feel that weight off his shoulders. He wanted her to. "Can you teach me?" He could tell he had taken her by surprise from her reaction. The way her eyebrows lifted up, and the way the hands she had rested on his chest clenched at his shirt. "Teach me how to forget?" She shook her head. "It's not about forgetting, Naruto. I will never forget what happened to her, what happened to me." She trailed off, looking intently at her hands. Then she looked straight into cerulean eyes. A new confidence he hadn't seen in her shone through. "But, I can help you try to forgive. Try to not let the vengefulness eat away at who you are until the only thing you can feel is rage." He could tell she spoke from experience, like she too had been like him. Had been victim to her emotions, had been a safety hazard amongst her friends and family. He couldn't quite understand how someone like Hinata would ever even come close to how disgusting he was as a person. Yet, the way she looked at him made him shake, gave him no hesitation about her being able to help him. It felt like she was the only person that would ever be able to help him, and there was nothing he trusted more than his gut instincts. "I want that. I want to feel okay. To not have to continuously control the feelings of anger, to not have to worry that I'll blow. I can help." She sealed that promise with a kiss on the tip of his nose. Hinata groggily woke up the following morning. Bright sun shone through the clear globe that surrounded her. It didn't take long for her to remember the events of last night, the connection she and Naruto had experienced. At least she hoped Naruto had felt that connection as well. She had never discussed her scar with anyone aside from her family and Sasuke. It was a taboo subject around the compound. Although she had meant what she told Naruto last night, that she knew more death wouldn't make a difference to what had already occurred, it didn't mean she sometimes didn't feel resentful. Of course she did. It had thrown everything she had ever known into chaos. It had altered her life indefinitely. She had lost her mother, disappointed her father, and almost lost her life in the process. She knew the anger lingered, but she had found a way around it. A way to deal with it, without having to sacrifice much of who she was. That exactly is what she wanted to show him. To let him know there was another way. "What's got you so deep in thought so early in the morning?" Naruto teased. Hinata giggled while simultaneously thinking about how his voice would make an amazing start to all her mornings. I guess, I'm just a little sad the night ended so quickly. She hadn't noticed she spoke aloud until she watched blonde brows lift in what she assumed was surprise. She panicked. Of course she was the only one who had felt that connection last night. She had probably imagined the whole stupid conversation. I just mean, it was fun is all. God, she probably looked so dumb to him right now. Without even letting him take a breath to answer, Hinata rapidly got off his chest and stood up. She grabbed her phone off the table, she had set it on, and checked for any missed calls or texts. It was barely 6 in the morning, so she wasn't surprised to find nothing pressing alerting her. Damn, now she really had to face Naruto after making a fool out of herself. No messages, she informed him while finally making eye contact. He looked dazed, like he still hadn't actually woken up. A serene smile lit up his features. She liked this smile on him, she didn't see it often, and she never was able to get a glimpse of it while they were around others. It felt like it took him ages before he stood off the ground and stalked closer to her. She held her breath, not at all prepared for the rejection he was definitely going to deliver. She could already hear him say it in her mind. Ah yeah, last night was a mistake. I really didn't mean to lead you on. Blah, blah, blah. Why did she always get herself into these types of situations, just speaking her mind without thinking about the heartbreak? She hadn't broken eye contact with him, but she really wasn't focusing on the words coming out of his mouth. She was still thinking about her impending doom. I don't think I've ever. She heard him speak, effectively gaining all of her attention. I mean, I've just never felt this way about anyone before. He was blushing now, a tan arm coming to rub the back of his neck in a nervous habit she had noted he had since the flower shop incident. Hinata felt her tongue tingle, she licked her lips in anticipation. Is he talking about last night? I don't want to freak you out though, I know you probably are already involved with someone. I mean, I thought Sasuke for so long. I don't think it's him anymore, but I also haven't actually asked, so maybe it is? I don't know, he'd probably kick my ass regardless of if he was or wasn't. Hinata was having a hard time keeping up with his rambling. Why was he talking about Sasuke and involvement? Naruto, I don't really understand. Of course you don't, because I'm an idiot and I talk way too much about things that don't make any goddamn sense without the ability to check myself. Hinata had finally had enough, so she did something she typically would never do. She closed the distance between them and grasped his hand, effectively shutting him up. You're not an idiot, Naruto, and I really like your stories. You're fun to listen to. She encouraged softly. You like my stories? He questioned, his tone incredulous. Wait, no, that's not my point. Damn it. Okay, Hinata, just listen. He had moved both hands and placed them on her shoulders, making sure she stayed in place. He took a big breath before continuing. She watched amazed at the heave of his chest. She had no doubt that if he took off his shirt she would see chiseled features. He asked you to listen, Hinata. She chastised herself, this was not the time to get lost in a fantasy. I know I'm not eloquently spoken, and I know this is going to sound fucking insane because you've only known me for a while, but I honestly can't hold this back. If I don't say it now I'm scared I'm never going to be able to say it, and then it would eat at me because this feeling is so intense and it's demanding. She was sure he wasn't breathing at this point from how fast he was speaking. This feeling, I think. I mean I know I am, but maybe saying I think will be less shocking to you. But anyways, Hinata, look, I think I'll. Hinata. The loud interruption made them both jump. She turned towards the disruption and noticed her brother, Sasuke, Sakura, Tenten and Shikamaru and Temari pounding on the door desperately. That didn't seem good. Ah, Naruto, they seem rather desperate. Maybe we can continue our talk later? She watched him nod dejectedly and pull himself away from her. It was him that walked toward the door to let their friends inside. Not even a second after opening the door, Sasuke's fist went full force into Naruto's unsuspecting face. What the fuck, Sasuke? Sasuke. Hinata hurriedly went to Naruto's aid, pressing her hand to the swelling of his cheek. Before she could do much more, Neji yanked her away from him. She was completely dazed. What the fuck is happening? She heard Naruto yell. He was reaching for her, concern laced over his facial features. Stay the hell away from her. Sasuke bit out, a venomous tone Hinata hadn't heard him use with Naruto in a long time. You didn't have to punch him, you jackass. Sakura sounded just as pissed off as Sasuke and Neji seemed to be. I don't understand, Hinata spoke up, voice frail and lips quivering. Sakura looked at her sympathetically, a coldness still present. Not a look she ever thought Sakura was capable of. Were they not friends? It seemed that Naruto had noticed the icy glare as well. Why are you looking at her like that? Blue eyes narrowed in suspicion. She's not who you think she is, Naruto. It was Shikamaru who answered his question. She's not who she says she is. Tamari spoke up agitatedly. What about poster boy over there? Acting like he's not the son of one of the most prestigious gang leaders in this entire fucking country. Time seemed to have frozen for Hinata at that point. She was so confused. Were they still talking about Naruto? The boy she had come to know and probably love. The boy who had not only a few hours ago sheltered her and took care of her. Who were they talking about? It certainly could not have been the Naruto she knew. She looked to Naruto for an explanation, for any sort of comfort. He was pointedly not looking in her direction, instead he was looking at his fists. Each one curled tight enough to draw blood. What the fuck is happening here? His voice sounded so incredibly different than before. She watched alarmed as Sakura, Tenten and Shikamaru took wary steps away from him. How could they leave him by himself when he sounded so broken? She wanted more than anything to go to him, to provide what little comfort she could. She didn't care if his family was in a gang. She didn't care about any of that. She just wanted him. However, Neji had a tight hold of her wrist and Sasuke was positioned protectively next to her, ready to charge at any moment. Even Tamari was standing between her and Naruto. Naruto, you need to calm down. Shikamaru spoke up. This isn't the place to lose control. Look up Naruto. Sakura begged. Sasuke and Neji tensed. What's wrong with him? Neji voiced. After what felt like an infinity, Naruto's head rose, eyes roaming around the room looking for something. They seemed off, Hinata noted. They looked empty. They also seemed to teeter between cerulean and red. Naruto. She called out, hoping to ground his aimless stare. Confused eyes snapped in her direction. It took a moment for his eyes to settle and yet his rage did not dissipate. Realizing this, Sakura immediately called out. Naruto, you need to stop. You're going to hurt us. All of us. Her tone was all businesslike and suddenly the conversation they had shared the previous night popped into her mind. Because when I lose control of my emotions I'm out for blood, I don't care whose. That's what he had said. She knew that aura. She had felt it so many times with herself. She knew what would happen next. How uncontrollable the rage would be. Neji, you have to let me go, she begged. He's going to lose it like how I used to. She watched him tense, hesitate and let go of her not even a second later. Without another thought she dropped down to Naruto's level, making sure to speak in hushed, even tones. It's okay Naruto, it's a misunderstanding. No one is going to hurt you, or them. She reassured, nodding toward his friends so he knew she was talking about them. Naruto shook his head aggressively, not looking up at her. They're fine, she tried again. All she received was a low growl. Something nagging at her that his concern didn't stem from his friends or himself. I'm okay too, she spoke up. This seemed to make his fists loosen their grasp. No one is going to hurt me Naruto. You're here right? You would protect me anyways. This time he looked up at her, eyes the color of blood. Still she did not shy away. Remember? I feel safe with you. I know nothing will happen. She could tell everyone in the room had heard her. If she was in her right state of mind she would have blushed. She did not feel comfortable with everyone knowing about her feelings. Especially not Sasuke or Neji, but here they were. You're safe, Naruto repeated. Safe with me. Previously red eyes reverted back to sparkling blue and she released a heavy breath. From her peripheral she watched all of Naruto's friends release the tension in their shoulder blades. Offhandedly she wondered how destructive Naruto could get. She stood after a while, making sure to help Naruto up with her. He seemed back to normal, only exhausted. She knew why. It took a lot of energy to do what he had just done. She should know. What happened last night? She questioned, needing to know what had caused such a ruckus. If she were to look at Sakura she would see a look of utter amazement. Show him the tattoo behind your ear. Sasuke instructed Hinata. Her eyes widened and she felt herself panic at the prospect. Why would I? Just do it. Neji responded, no shred of emotion. Fine, she muttered under her breath. She gathered all of her hair to one side and showed Naruto the area of skin behind her left ear. Not even a second later she watched him tense and exhale harshly against her neck. Although she knew it wasn't the time she felt her insides tingle at feeling his breath tickling her skin. You're a part of them? His voice was low, lower than a whisper. How did he know what it meant? Yes. Shit, his voice sounded pained. Shit, shit, shit. Before she could even ask him what was wrong, he diverted her attention to his arm. He grasped the end of his shirt and lifted it up slightly. A sour expression forced its way onto Hinata's face as soon as she laid eyes on it. A tattoo perfectly placed below his belly button. A sun, with the Uzumaki emblem inside. She knew exactly what it meant. Uzumaki, she muttered. She knew Naruto had heard her though. You remember? My dad, he responded. She didn't need to know more. My name, she began. It's Hinata Hyuga. I figured. Not much else would have made them react that way. They must have found out about Sakura and Tenten. He looked toward them for confirmation. They both nodded their heads solemnly. Now you know, Neji sounded terse. You can't. We would all die. It sounded like he was trying to convince himself too. Do you get that, Naruto? Shikamaru shoved himself into the blonde's face. We would all die, including her. Naruto pushed Shikamaru out of his way, roughly grabbing his bag and his coat from the ground. I get it, he spit out. Blue eyes momentarily locked with Lilac. She tried to be brave, to not look so heartbroken. But she was. She knew what she felt for Naruto probably wouldn't be reciprocated, but knowing she wouldn't be able to be with him even if it was heart-wrenching. It killed her. I'm sorry, Naruto whispered while speeding past her. He had shut his eyes in what looked like pain before kicking the door open and leaving her behind. She felt her breath leave her instantaneously. He would never be hers. Little did she know, he was thinking the exact same thought. She would never be his. He's unsteady, Ino voiced warily but truthfully. Naruto could hear them all talking from outside his room. He drowsily blinked his eyes. Although he hadn't quite been asleep, he had been enjoying the peace and quiet. His room had always been an explosion of color growing up, but now if he looked behind him he knew the only thing he would see was a solitary bright orange accent wall. It had been Ino's idea. He had actually wanted to paint his entire room a vibrant orange. This had been a compromise. He had done that a lot for them. For his friends and his family. He had given up many things he had wanted. How much more did they expect him to give up? He didn't know. Probably wouldn't find out until his death, when he was sure the entirety of his life would flash before him and all he would be left with was a feeling of regret. A soft, Ino, not so loud, jolted his thoughts back to his current predicament. He eyed his door in irritation. Sighing in resignation, he stood from his bed and sluggishly made his way to the door. There really was only one way to get rid of the lot. If I'm so unsteady, maybe you should stay away from my room. He casually remarked as soon as he swung the door fully open. He'd been wearing the same sweatpants and t-shirt for over a week. Sakura puckered her lips in what he assumed to be disgust. That's not what I meant. Ino rebuked, not at all ashamed at being caught. I just mean, you're. He noticed she hesitated for a long time before completing her sentence. Upset. How was he supposed to respond to such an obvious accusation? Just 2 weeks ago he had been blindsided. Just 2 weeks ago he had come to learn that loving hurts, a lot more than it should. Just 2 weeks ago he had lost before even been given a goddamn chance. Just 2 weeks ago I lost her. The looks he received from Sakura, Ino and Shikamaru had him in a panic. Did I say that aloud? You never had her, Shikamaru unhelpfully provided. It made Naruto cringe and Sakura and Ino elbow the brown-eyed man in the ribs. What? He questioned, holding his now aching side. I'm not wrong. This statement he exclaimed with an eye roll. Can I help you all with something? Naruto finally spoke up. Last time I checked, I'm staying out of trouble and not bothering anyone. What more can you ask for? Unless there's some pending matters to be dealt with regarding my dad and his requests, I don't see a need for you to be here. He could see the flash of hurt cross Sakura's face, green eyes twinkling in what seemed like sympathy. Did he really look that pathetic? We know. We just wanted to hang out. Since we've got a month before our last semester starts up, we figured we would enjoy the break as best we can. Sakura's voice was soft, so much softer than he was used to. Naruto looked at a fixed point above her head, refusing to meet her eyes. He knew the sadness in his eyes would be reflected back at him through a pair of emerald ones. He knew she understood him almost better than anyone else. Almost, but not quite. Naruto swore his mind was his greatest enemy. Before he could think twice, a pair of soft lilac eyes popped into his mind. He might as well have been transparent under her knowing gaze. Those peculiar eyes of hers could see him, could see right through him. Her gaze had unraveled him more than once before. He would give anything to watch her do it again. To feel her do it again. He remembered just a couple of months ago they had run into each other at their university's library. She had been carrying books piled so high she couldn't even see where she was going. It had taken him less than the blink of an eye to march up to her and tease her about it. "I'm honestly surprised," he had said then, taking some of her load off, "that it takes 6 books to block your vision. I would have assumed it only took 4. Then he had boisterously laughed and pretended to measure her miniature height against his. He remembered as if it happened yesterday the way her charming laughter echoed around him. The way she hadn't been bothered by his joke. The way she had playfully glared at him and said she was actually carrying 7 books, not 6. Everything always felt like that with Hinata. It felt easy. Effortless almost, which isn't what Naruto had been used to. He had always worked for everything, for respect, for friendship, for the love of others. He was constantly earning these things. No one had ever just offered their friendship, or respect, or even love. Maybe besides his parents. But no one had definitely ever seemingly appeared out of thin air and plugged a hole he hadn't even known existed in his life. He hadn't ever known that his life after Hinata would be so dull. "Hello, Earth to Naruto. We're still here, you know." Ino's voice was loud and aggressive this time. It echoed off the hallway walls. Not for the first time it drew his attention to the way this compound was built. Every building was efficient, businesslike. 6 rooms per floor, 3 on one side and 3 on the other. The rooms looked identical, each an exact replica of the one in front, the one beside. Everything was symmetrical and organized. He hated everything about this place. Everything about how the dorms were arranged, about how his life was basically a dictation. He had been treated like a machine growing up. He was still thought of as a machine. One of many conveniently raised with only one purpose. "Naruto," Shikamaru's voice was strained. For what felt like the millionth time Naruto sighed. He didn't want to hang out with them. As much as he loved his friends he just wanted to be alone, to think and fantasize. However, one good look at Shikamaru told him neither Sakura nor Ino would allow him to keep bailing on them. Heaving in an unpleasant manner, blonde spikes jostled and fell in front of his eyes. "Fine, I'll go. Just give me a bit. I probably should shower." "Oh thank God," Ino exclaimed, exaggeratedly holding her breath. "You reek." Grunting in frustration, Naruto mumbled to give him 30 minutes and slammed the door in their faces. "The mall will be so much fun." Hina. Clear, teal eyes stared back at her in excitement. Something she hadn't felt in weeks. "I'm just not really in the mood to be honest," Hinata responded softly. She had noted that even her voice had lost strength. Temari's face changed from excitement into a bitter scowl, clearly not impressed with her answer. She really didn't care much at this point. For the better part of 2 weeks she hadn't left the compound for anything. "Hinata?" came the whiny response. "I understand you're sad, but we need to get you up and moving." "You're moping." Hinata never mopes. Temari had become very informative these past couple of weeks apparently. Still, Hinata did not budge. "Hina, look, I haven't seen you this sad in a long time. Last time you baked so much you had been inconsolable." Pale lavender eyes widened, startled at her words. This topic being brought up was the last thing Hinata needed right now. "I haven't baked all that much," she defended, rather weakly. "I've eaten 27 fucking cookies," a new voice interrupted. Shortly after Hinata watched spiky dark hair make its way into the kitchen. A pale hand grasped at something on the counter. 28. Sasuke amended while biting into a freshly baked chocolate chip cookie. Neji waltzed in after him, his long hair neatly tied into a low ponytail. This time he wasn't wearing the bandana across his forehead, and the tattoo of an Uchiha crest and Hyuga flame inside of a crescent moon was clearly visible. Quickly yet casually Neji snuck half of a cookie into his mouth. "This is my 30th. Death by cookie is how I'll go if you don't stop," he warned, and it managed to crack a smile from her. Something she was sure she hadn't done since the atrium incident. "I feel like you're all exaggerating," Hinata reasoned, laughing slightly as she spoke. "You're wrong." Hinata knew this velvety smooth voice very well. She turned just in time to watch Itachi, Sasuke's older brother, sneak a cookie off the plate. "They've been keeping score and everything," he politely informed her. "I think Gaara is winning though." "Oh?" Tamari spoke, a sick sort of pride-filled smirk etching across her lips. How many has my foolish little brother eaten? 33, Gara's voice sounded pained. But I will throw up if I have to eat another. He paused in deep thought. No offense, he added stoically, looking intently at Hinata. She shook her head dismissively, not really caring about the statement. She actually found this whole ordeal to be somewhat amusing. Holy shit, Hinata, just between the three of us that's almost 100 cookies. That's not even counting the rest of the compound, who knows how many they have eaten. Sweet, soft giggles peeled past her lips. A lightness she hadn't felt in weeks suddenly entering her system. How could she ever have isolated herself to the point of ignoring all of them? They always made everything so much better, regardless of the situation at hand. They would always be her family. Ah, okay. Last batch, she spoke while pulling out a tray of a dozen from the oven, I promise. Itachi's eyes crinkled gently as he approached her. I can take care of these, he guaranteed while taking all of the leftover cookies. All Hinata could do was nod in amusement at his obvious pining. If anything, she knew Itachi had always loved those cookies. He had loved them when her mom made them, and now he loved when she made them. Whatever, Tamari deadpanned. Can we go to the mall now? I'm craving a pretzel. Tamari loved salty foods, Hinata knew that too. There was actually very little she didn't know about her friends, about her family. She was observant and detail-oriented. It didn't hurt that her intelligence was so far above average. She knew things most people hadn't bothered to even want to know. Maybe it was intuition too. Maybe she could connect with people's feelings and just know. A mix between logic and heart was always the key to success. It's what her mother used to tell her. But now her dad hated that saying. Anything to do with the heart was a danger to their lives. Maybe that's why it hurt even more than usual to know her feelings for Naruto would never be validated. Because they would have been, if her mom were still alive. Yeah, she heard herself speak, not a shred of the lightness she had felt just a minute ago present on her soft features. I'll get changed and meet you guys at the front. She left too soon to see the saddened eyes of her best friends behind her. Naruto went about in the same way for the whole month of winter break. He would mope long enough for his friends to chastise him, drag him out and make him enjoy a night. Then he'd come right back to moping. Although he was normally able to shake off pessimistic thoughts and feelings with relative ease, for some reason he wasn't able to move on from this. He wasn't able to shake himself free of the utter disappointment he felt knowing Hinata was out there, across town, and he for the life of him wouldn't be able to reach out to her. Holidays felt so pointless this time around. The laughs his dad had attempted to share with him and Kakashi felt like daggers knowing he was kind of betraying them for having feelings for her. Not to mention he had kept a gift he had especially bought to give her during Christmas. It had been a way for him to undoubtedly confess his feelings, to let her know how quickly and effortlessly she had become a huge part of his world. A light in a world where even the shadows had shadows. A light in his shitty, lying-ridden life. He had never wanted anything as badly as he wanted her. Never craved someone's presence as much as her soothing one. At this point he had branded himself as obsessed, because really there wasn't another way to describe the overwhelming urges he had to resist. The urge to text her, to call her, to tell his entire family to go fuck themselves and run away with her. Yet he did. He squashed those urges as soon as he felt them coming. He had been doing exactly what he had been taught to do in the compound. Completely shut off his reactions to feelings. Yes, he acknowledged them, but he was trained better than to give in to them. At least he thought so. Some nights were easier than others, some nights were absolute hell. He'd read once, in a book he didn't care to recall the title of, about different types of obsessions. All unhealthy, he reminded himself aloud. Somehow in the dead of night, with no light aside from the moon outside his window, he felt the most vulnerable. The most likely to drown in thoughts of soft lilac eyes, of midnight silky hair, of a gentle yet blinding smile. All unhealthy, he repeated, shaking his head free of the troublesome thoughts. His world had always been built on shadows, every sort of gray and black imaginable. Very little times could he have imagined meeting a source of light as bright as his mother had been. She had taken him by surprise that day at the cafe, when he realized he saw color for the first time in what felt like ages. It was slight, almost entirely too dull, but it was real. Then when they had spoken for the first time, the color had brightened, even if just a little. Consequently, little by little she had shed the different shades of darkness that riddled his everyday life and provided the brightest shades of hue he had ever seen. Suddenly, he had woken up one cold winter morning, a couple of weeks before the atrium incident, to the realization that he wanted to see his life in color. Wanted to plan out a future for himself brighter than the sun itself. She had done that for him. She had unknowingly motivated him. Through their late-night calls and texts, through her unwavering support, through her caring and gentle smiles. Her very existence had been guiding him to a better life, to a brighter tomorrow. And now what? What do I have now? He yelled. Feeling the droplets of water cascading down his face did nothing to ease his anger and frustration. Shadows, he responded after a long time, the outrage deflating into an unsettling indifference. My world will always be made of shadows. Again he tried to rattle himself aggressively, almost knocking down the picture of him and his family. At least his mother still provided color in the picture. Tomorrow, he promised himself, tomorrow would be a new day. Tomorrow would be the start of a new semester. His last semester actually. The last chance he had before enslaving himself to his family's duties for the rest of his life. Tomorrow he would wake up fine. What a fucking lie. Dull, blue eyes closed in distress. Tomorrow, he would not be fine. Hinata knew it was bound to happen, especially with sharing the same major as his best friend, yet she really hadn't mentally prepared herself to watch him walk right past her as if she didn't exist. It had hurt a lot more than what she expected. It had caused bile to pool at the base of her throat. It had made most of her body go numb. How was he so okay? How was he able to look through her, as if he hadn't shared some of the most vulnerable details about himself to her? As if they hadn't, for the majority of the past months, continuously spoken before, during and after classes? It hurt. It hurt to breathe the same air as him, knowing he simply didn't care. Now she didn't want to go to class. She very suddenly didn't want to be an engineer. She didn't care about how dropping out would affect her life. She just wanted to leave as quickly as her legs would willingly take her. She didn't dare look up. The fear of indifferent blue eyes judging her kept her head bowed. He probably thought she was an idiot, this silly girl trying to reach the unattainable. He would be correct in thinking so. She was the very definition of an idiot. This affiliation would benefit no one. It would actually destroy bonds they both had spent an entire life building. But she wanted it so goddamn bad, wanted to be beside him. Wanted to walk towards whatever the future held with him. Against Hinata's better judgment she snuck a glance in his direction. He stood between Tenten and Shikamaru, conversing amiably. Not an ounce of heartache visible to her. His smile stretched as wide as it used to, his eyes sparkled as blazingly as they always had, and his posture as relaxed as she had always noted it to be. Nothing had changed for him, it hadn't broken him like it did her. It was proof enough, for her at least, to know she was the weak one. The one who had mistakenly fallen for a scorching star. A star that burned far too brilliantly to be grasped by the likes of her. Hinata's grip on her backpack straps tightened significantly, willing the tears she felt stinging her eyes back into the depths of her heart. If anything, she would at least not give him the pleasure and satisfaction of watching her break. She tried desperately to will her heart to let her eyes roam, to not be fixated on the small dimples forming perfectly at both corners of his lips. She screamed in her mind to be able to not notice the way his blonde spikes seemingly fought against gravity to stay upright. She tried so incredibly hard not to smile at the thought of toned arms encircling her body protectively like he had that night. But alas, Hinata had no self-control around Naruto, so her eyes stayed glued to his form, and then it happened. It only lasted a second, but she was sure it happened. He had made eye contact with her, had looked at her the way he always did. She had seen it then, the vulnerability, and the sorrow so carefully hidden underneath pools of cerulean. Even if only for the briefest of moments, it was there. At least she thought she saw it. Shaking her head slightly, she fixed her gaze at the ceiling. Hinata could feel herself crumble under his stare, but didn't find the courage to look back at him. She really didn't feel like being there at all. Like having her mind be infested with thoughts of him. Thoughts of a life she so desperately wanted but was forbidden to have. How much did she actually need a biomedical engineering degree? Her life was already planned out for her, had been since her birth. So, why? Why did she need to be here? It was pointless. I don't need this, she whispered softly to herself. It was enough of an assurance to get up from the desk she had been sitting at. She hadn't even taken off her backpack anyways. She tried to walk gracefully, holding on to whatever confidence she could muster while marching past him. She was mere steps away from reaching the exit when someone nonchalantly placed a hand on her unsuspecting left shoulder, effectively changing her course. Her body had turned around quickly, hands already out in a defensive stand. The breath she had been holding leaving her rapidly. Whoa, the boy chuckled awkwardly, hands coming up to feign innocence. Class hasn't even started, but you're going to bail already? Doesn't seem like you, Hinata. The way he had broken up her name gave her the impression that he knew exactly who she was, what family she belonged to. From her peripheral she watched Naruto's muscles tense, deep blue eyes taking in the scene unfolding before him. It had apparently also piqued Shikamaru's and Tenten's interest, she noted. Their eyes looked just as confused as she felt. Now is not the time. She reminded herself. Do I know you? She decided to ask as politely as she could. The stranger had not missed the impersonal tone she had taken to using with him. Not yet, he admitted, almost arrogantly. He shrugged and winked at her rather playfully. She couldn't stop herself from making a face filled with distaste. But, he continued, not fazed by her lack of interest. Now his tone was mischievous. You will. He had walked away from her without allowing her the time to respond, to figure out what the hell had just happened. He had walked out of the classroom without a second glance in her direction. She had decidedly never seen him before. He hadn't been in any of the engineering programs. She would know, the classes had gotten significantly smaller as the years progressed. So why was he here? Waiting for her, logically she knew. Why though? That would remain a mystery. Snapping out of her thoughts she realized their professor had finally arrived. Looking back as discreetly as she could, she noticed both Naruto and Tenten walking toward the exit, leaving Shikamaru by himself. As observant as she was, she had completely missed the look Naruto was throwing her way. A concerned grimace taking hold of his lips. His arms had been crossed at his chest, muscles tightened in a fighting position. She had missed all of it. Hinata, her professor spoke. Would you mind taking a seat? Sure, she responded, desperately looking for any available seats. That interaction with the no-name stranger had occurred while her already small class filled up. There, her professor spoke again, pointing toward the only empty seat in the class. The one seat she desperately did not want to accept. All pairs of eyes stared at her until she sighed in compliance. Sluggishly, Hinata walked up to the empty desk, sparing the man already taking up one of the two spots a fleeting look. Sorry, she whispered, knowing that he would probably hate this arrangement. Again, she had missed the way Shikamaru's eyebrows rose in surprise at her submissive nature. A glimpse of regret lurking in chocolate eyes. It had been a couple of weeks. Weeks since he had properly gotten a good look at her. It had been very apparent that Hinata had avoided every situation humanly possible that would lead her to cross paths with him. She had even been getting to her engineering class late, he knew. Her friends no longer ate lunch at the atrium. Not that he was expecting them to, but still. He half wished his friends would relocate to a new spot as well. The memories were fresh when he was there. The early mornings and late afternoons studying or just fooling around with her. He could clearly see them all paying out in his mind's eye. Could see the way her nose would crinkle at a distasteful yet funny joke. The way her fingers fiddled with her shirt, or with her other hand when she felt stressed. The way her eyes would glaze over when she was far too focused to notice anything around her. He could still clearly recall how she wore her emotions on her face, how the vulnerability in her features took his breath away. He remembered all of it. Worst of all, he remembered that crucial night, the night he had shared one of his deepest insecurities with her and she had smiled. She had stayed. She had not been scared or disgusted. She had accepted his scars. Accepted him. How are your classes going, Naruto? Sakura still spoke to him with such gentility that it made him nauseous. Fine, I only have 3, he admitted, catching his friends by surprise. Not 5? Shikamaru questioned. No, I dropped 2, he answered honestly and uncaring, taking small bites of his lunch that tasted bland. Maybe it was a him problem now. Everything tasted bland nowadays, even ramen. Why? Shikamaru asked, as stoically as he could muster. What the hell is wrong with you? Ino spoke up at the same time. Tenten beside her looked completely appalled by his confession. That's a rather dumb decision. Shino shared his input, and now Naruto knew. It really had been a dumb decision. Shino typically did not make these types of comments. It was almost enough to change his mind, but not quite enough to really pique and hold his concern. Sakura had been oddly quiet during this exchange. Emerald eyes narrowing in sympathy yet again. He knew that look. Before this situation with Hinata unfolded, he got that look from her once a year. During his mother's anniversary of death. Now it was an everyday feature on her face. He hated it, hated being sympathized by her. Like he couldn't take care of himself. I'll graduate anyways, what's the big deal? Geez. He feigned disinterest with an air of impassivity, knowing well that none of his friends would fall for it. Which classes? Sakura finally spoke up, the soft look in her eyes being replaced by annoyance. Does it matter? He retaliated seriously. Yes, she seethed between clenched teeth. Even if she tried to hide it, Naruto knew Sakura better than most people. Knew her temper was similar to a firecracker. This was the most control he'd seen in a while. Nothing that will prevent me from graduating, he responded vaguely. Are you sure? Tenten asked him, seeing as Sakura was busy trying to control her attitude towards him. Yeah, he waved his hand dismissively, simultaneously picking up his backpack. They were 2 option classes. He didn't waste any time in discarding his leftover lunch and walked away from them towards the only exit to the atrium. I'm actually done for the day. I'm sure Shino can give you guys a ride back later. Then he was gone, not at all bothering to listen to their responses. It had been an awful week. It was finally Friday today, and he just wanted to go back to the compound and train until he bled. Until he was so tired he could barely stand, let alone think. He had found a new way of dealing with her absence. With the reassuring thought of training until he collapsed, he sped toward his car. Naruto. A delicate voice called out. It had probably been his imagination. It sounded too much like her voice. Regardless, he looked back expecting to be disappointed. What greeted his gaze, however, was not disillusionment. Instead, he stood there bewildered, completely astonished that it had been Hinata who had called out to him. Perplexed, he watched her subtle curves gracefully approach him. It took her only 3 seconds to break into a quick jog in order to get to him sooner. If he hadn't been so busy ogling her advancing form, he would have realized that she was running to deny him the opportunity of running away from her. Naruto, she repeated hesitantly, eyes glued on his feet for what felt like an eternity before she looked up at him. Breathless, she still left him gasping for air, she always did. Her voice though, it sounded so incredibly brittle, almost as if she was constantly fighting herself to speak up around him. He hated that he made her feel that way, so cautious and susceptible. It wasn't like her, and he decided he hated it. Hated everything about the situation they were both currently in. In the way only her melodic voice could, it broke him out of his never-ending loathsome thoughts. I can understand why. He painfully watched her chest heave as she spoke. Short bursts of air escaped her lips with every spoken syllable. She looked paler than when he had last seen her. She looked much more frail. The type of frail you would be scared to hold too tightly in case she shattered. The thought that he would be capable of shattering such a witty, intelligent and emotionally resistant individual was laughable. The fact that he would never hold that much power over her emotions teased him relentlessly, to the point of tears some nights. Yet, here she stood. Not as the daughter of an infamous leader, but as a girl visibly exhausted. It seemed like her body wanted to sag against his. Almost as if it were looking for the protection his body so badly wanted to provide. He had to look away, he couldn't handle having her right there. A mere foot away without the possibility to reach out, to tuck her hair behind her ear. To finally be able to freely express just how much she made him feel. He knew he couldn't, it would wreak havoc on her life. Her relationship with her friends and her family would be destroyed. Not to mention the death threats that would arise. It was all too much. Too many cons. You can't, Naruto, walk away. For her good as much as yours. He had been so close to being able to walk away from her. But just as he steeled his motivation, she had reached a pale, fragile hand out to him. Long, smooth fingers grasping his hand protectively. As if he was the one who hadn't eaten for the better part of a month. As if he was the one that was quickly losing composure, motivation, happiness. As if she saw exactly what he was going through, what he desperately and actively tried to hide from the world. What a terrifying feeling, to know someone could be able to unravel your entire being with a look. It felt surreal. How was he supposed to put those feelings aside? He couldn't walk away from her. He didn't think he would ever be able to. Completely dumbfounded by her actions and her determination, he stood in place. Overwhelming thoughts racing left and right. It didn't take long for her to straighten herself out. He watched enchantedly as the grace and poise that normally surrounded her lit up her features. This was the Hinata he had come to know, come to love. She cleared her throat slightly to call his attention back to her. As if you actually needed to do so. I understand why you left that day. Why you walked away with only an apology to offer. She spoke genuinely, not a hint of malice in her tone. It had been one of the things he had regretted the most. Speeding past her with a half-assed apology tumbling loose from his lips. He should have stayed. He should have seen what happened next. But he hadn't been able to, hadn't been emotionally strong enough to stand by her side in that situation. He was a disgrace. Even knowing that, he doubted he would be able to do it properly if given another chance. Who was he to love her properly, the way she deserved? When couldn't have even stuck around the time she probably needed him the most. Worthless, I'm absolutely worthless. How much more was he expected to take? How much more would he be able to handle? How much heartbreak was too much? He hadn't noticed he was shaking at this point, with fear, regret or anticipation. He really didn't know at this point. It's okay, she soothed. She sounded just as reassuring as she had that day, when she had looked into blood-filled eyes and didn't run away from him. I'm not supposed to, she continued speaking, seemingly not at all bothered by his lack of response. He really wasn't able to speak. He didn't trust his voice not to crack, didn't trust his feelings not to all flow out of his heart and past his lips the moment he opened them. I know I'm not supposed to, but I don't think I care, Naruto. She was back to sounding shy, a very demure blush dusting her cheeks. Why did she have to be so beautiful? You don't care? He repeated her statement back to her, like a love-struck fool. Nonetheless, she nodded her head in agreement. I don't care about your last name, she clarified. Cerulean eyes widened in absolute shock. If he hadn't already been looking intently at her, he would have sworn he had imagined those words from her. I don't care about the tattoo on your stomach. I don't care about the damage you're able to inflict because of the trauma you suffered. I don't care that you are quite possibly the only person I would get killed for being with. Her words had always been elegant. Even in the middle of a one-sided conversation she sounded dignified. He wanted nothing more than to lose all of his senses in her. Wanted to drink in her smell, her touch. Wanted to taste her lips, get lost in her beauty. He wanted to listen to her go on forever, about what he really didn't care, as long as she stayed. Hinata stopped speaking long enough for Naruto to notice. Her delicate brows knit together contemplatively. He could tell now she was thinking over and choosing the words she was about to speak aloud more carefully. Naruto stood stock still, surprise clearly laced throughout his features. Even his body seemed surprised at her declaration. I like you. I like the person I am around you. It had taken her an enormous amount of courage to be so forthright with him. He knew her well enough to realize how strained her jaw had become, how her collarbone tensed up awaiting his reaction. Still he stood there dumbfounded, not being able to fully process this conversation. Next came her pained expression, her stress so evident from the way her finger fiddled with her sleeve. Still Naruto said nothing. This girl was mesmerizing. But, I get it, he heard her continue. Now slightly bothered by his lack of response. Why you can't accept me, and I understand. I'll respect that boundary. I just really wanted you to know how I felt at least. She was taking deep, unsteady breaths. Since we hadn't really gotten a chance to talk about it. She's real? His thoughts questioned her existence a lot, but now more so than ever. I'll maybe see you around campus, she finished, realizing he probably wasn't going to speak. His hand had automatically tightened around hers, forcefully keeping her in place. She was looking at him now, the way he loved. Her eyes completely on him. Not on Sasuke, not on Neji, not on Gaara or Kiba or even Shikamaru. Not on that random guy who had grabbed her shoulder, no. They were solely fixed on him, waiting patiently for him to speak. Her eyes shone, more brightly than anyone else's from all the emotion she was able to express through a look. It was a look he had undoubtedly fallen in love with. A look he would graciously fall for over and over again. Except this time there was something else, more feelings in the depths of light. Heartache and dejection. They were a perfect match to the feelings he knew she was able to see through his eyes. He felt it all, the feelings she so fearfully expressed. There was worry, pain and despair, so many bleak feelings he had been forcing her to feel. The affliction was the worst feeling to realize she was emanating. It went deep, an anguish he wasn't sure existed outside of his heart. Yet, she was real and she felt it too, just as deeply as him. It was assuredly his fault. This was all his fault. Whatever she had been through these past months was entirely his fault. The realization caused a sour taste on his tongue, a poignant feeling emerging from the pit of his stomach. If he had less control he would have puked from the distress he was in. Because he had caused this. He had been relentless in his advances, in his desire for her friendship, for her love. Now she stood here, tears prickling the corners of her alluring eyes after telling him that she did in fact have feelings for him. She likes me. She liked him, she had literally just told him. But he loved her more than he even thought was possible. He loved her enough to know that it wasn't just her choice. That her family, her gang, would never allow her to have feelings for him. Her dad would rather mourn the loss of a daughter than have her be affiliated with him. He had heard enough stories about Hiyashi Hyuga to know this. To know how much she was risking just by being vulnerable around him. She was risking everything just to have this conversation with him, to openly admit she had feelings for him. Feelings that he didn't doubt stemmed straight from her heart because that's just the type of person Hinata was. He loved this about her. He just loved her, all of her. Loved her enough to not confess his love for her. To bury it so deep within the confines of his heart that it would be the last thing to ever escape. To not let her think he wanted anything beyond nothing with her. Her feelings for you, your feelings for her. They're going to get her killed. He knew. He knew it just as certainly as he knew the sky was blue and his hair was blonde. Her life would be over before they would even be able to have a first date. And then what? How was he supposed to wake up in the mornings knowing without reasonable doubt that she was dead because of him, because of his selfish desires? He couldn't possibly live with himself if that were to happen. If he were to be the reason her presence disappeared. If life without her around him was this incredibly painful, he honestly wouldn't be able to imagine the type of depression his life would become knowing she was gone forever. He was selfish, he knew that too. He had barely been able to control his impulsivity with things he wanted half as much as he wanted her. But he couldn't be selfish with something as delicate as this, with something as important as her life in his hands. He might as well be the one pulling the trigger if she died because of the feelings she held for him. Her death would shatter him. His heart would splinter in pieces. His mind would fracture itself knowing full well he had been at fault. He had been shattered once before, and had barely pieced himself back together. There was no coming back from this, no tomorrow without her in the world. You fucking can't. Naruto grasped at his shirt just above his heart, feeling the ache radiate into his fingertips. She was still looking at him with a glimmer of hope, and a gut-wrenching smile. He wanted nothing more than to close the distance. To hold her, to hide her, to run away from everything and everyone. To be able to protect her from this, from them. But, he knew he couldn't. There's really only one way he could protect her. Even if it killed him to say it, even if he had to fight the yearning in his heart. Even if he had to train until he forgot his own existence to deal with the mind-numbing pain this would surely bring. He would do this to ensure her safety. Nothing mattered more than her being alive, not even his love for her. If you do, he began, mouth closing up. Heart beating so painfully slow he thought he would pass out. See me around campus. Do me a favor and leave me the fuck alone. The shock she surely felt was noticeable. Light eyes became the size of saucer plates. The pale wrist he had been grasping onto jumped back to the safety of her chest as if it had been burned. The tension was palpable. It almost made him physically ill. Her face was crumbling. He could tell she was using every bit of the training she undoubtedly went through to not break down in front of him. It pulled at his heartstrings. He wanted to take it back. You can't. Hyugas, Uchihas, I don't give a shit who you are. You're my enemy. He could feel the hot searing pain behind his eyes. He was 5 seconds away from crying. Stay the fuck away from me, princess, or I'll kill you myself. Those words tasted so goddamn bitter in his mouth. Almost as soon as he said them, Naruto fled, not being able to see her reaction, to hear her response. It hurt enough as it was. Why did she have to have such a beautiful heart, so open and vulnerable? So prepared to sacrifice everything for them, for him. He didn't deserve that, he didn't deserve her. How could a heart like yours ever want a heart like mine? His question was met with silence.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.